I've forgotten mine. I think I refreshed this morning. If required, we'll be taking a break for tea and coffee, probably towards 11:30, given this is starting meetings at 10 o'clock from the usual previous 9:30. During breaks, please do not attempt to speak to members of the committee. We'll consider whether we need a lunch break later. We haven't found the toilets, they're out in the foyer. Are we live now? Okay, technical issue seems to have resolved, so we will continue. Support from IT to just make sure it stays that way. Okay, can we get to item 2? Apologies for absence, please.
Yes, we have Councillor J Toy and Councillor K Toy.
And substitutes?
Yes, we have Councillor Adams and Councillor Boyle.
Thank you. Item 4 is minutes of the meeting held on the 3rd of April. The minutes of the 2 previous meetings you have not yet seen will appear at the meeting on the 29th. Obviously appreciate there were problems with availability of staff and democratic services around those 2 meetings. Are there any errors or omissions or changes required to those minutes on the 3rd of April? If not, can we just show of hands to accept them, please? Thank you. Are there any items of urgent business? I have none.
None received.
Thank you. Order of business will be as per the published papers. Item 7, declarations of interest. Number of call-ins. Would members wish to comment on any of those? I'll start with Councillor Vickers.
Thank you, Chair. I spoke on my hands. Phone is now on. Thank you, Chairman. As you know, I spoke on McDonald's applications, so I consider myself predetermined and I won't vote again. On the issue of Hindle Weston, I was a parish councillor in Hindle Weston and I accompanied Councillor Hankins on a site visit and also met the planning officer initially with Councillor Hankins. So those of us who are well-intentioned do work together for the good of the community. But I don't consider myself predetermined on that issue and I'm willing to listen to what the planning officer has to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's switch to it.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I declare an interest of being predetermined on item 12, North Rex PF 250384.
Councillor Adams.
Thank you. Just looking for the number. It's number 9, PF 241079. Again, McDonald's. I held discussions with McDonald's in my position as leader of the council. Did indicate support for the development coming forward at the time. It's a bit of a grey area now because I know lots of the committee members have obviously indicated the support at the last meeting, but I'm willing to abstain on the vote for that if it makes it a bit easier. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. McDonald.
Thank you, Chairman. To further complicate that, I'm also McDonald's one. They're a customer of mine and also the family are known to me.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Hankins.
I'd like to declare that I am predetermined on that application.
Just to check, Councillor McDonald, are you going to abstain? You won't be voting. Okay, thank you. Are there any other declarations other than the general one I will make that we have all received considerable lobbying on many of these applications before us today, in particular related to Sheringham, Fakenham and Erpingham. So I'm sure you will have seen all of those and will have treated them accordingly. Okay, let us get to the substantive item, given that we have a long agenda. So if we move straight away to Sheringham, RV/24/1351. Remind you all, this is a revision to an extant permission, which is not a new application for development on that site. Mr. Allison, would you care to present?
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, councillors. Good morning, members of the public. I think it's important that I run through the description of this development for you to be clear as to exactly what you're voting on today. If I don't do that, it would be remiss of me and there may be some misunderstanding. So the application today relates to variation of conditions to a previously approved planning application for 62 retirement dwellings, with matters agreed in detail for access, roads, open space, parking areas and associated works. The proposals today seek to vary conditions imposed on planning application PF 22/1928. And those conditions to be varied relate to the approved plans, landscape and woodland management, the provision of storage sheds, external facing materials, road surfacing materials, on-site parking areas, revisions to the condition on ventilation and extraction systems, renewable energy scheme, and finally the flood risk assessment and drainage strategy approved under the previous planning permission. Chairman, if I can update that officers have received 11 further emails since the publication of the agenda this week, and those emails relate to issues such as surface water flooding, tree felling and encroachment onto adjacent land, and alleged breaches of planning conditions. Chairman, you've also made me aware of a lobbying email with a link to a video showing surface water flooding at the site. Those are the updates. That is the proposal in front of us. Officers set the proposals in the context of a set of similar proposals relating to an application recently approved by members of the Development Committee at their meeting on the 20th of July 2023. There has been no substantive change in planning policy or principles that apply to this application. The development remains on an allocated housing site within the current local plan. The most significant material change to have occurred over the period of time since July 23 is that this council can no longer claim to hold a 5-year housing land supply. Therefore, paragraph 11 in terms of the NPPF applies where there should be a tilted balance in the favour of the provision of new housing proposals. Members, you will have heard all about para 11, I am sure. The proposals in front of us today effectively engage in 3 areas. They seek to enable the discharge of conditions and delivery of development on this site over 2 phases. You will see slides which show you where those 2 phases are very shortly. We'll also see, members, there is a revised drainage strategy and there has been much comment on that. And we will also be looking to a revision to the approved plans under the 2022 application to accommodate the revised drainage strategy. If I can now move to the slides, please, Emma. If we can take the first slide, which is the location plan. So, members, you will see on this slide that we have the application site and the location of Sheringham Town Centre. The site lays to the south of Sheringham, and I'm sure from your considerations in 2023, you'll be pretty much aware of where we are today. Next slide, please. Here we have, members, a plan showing in red the proposed site area and in blue the land owned by the applicant. We will come back to the matter of land ownership and the application site shortly. You will note, members, however, we have an extensive area of land, including Sheringham House, woodland areas around Sheringham House and the application site in this consideration today. Next slide, please. Slide just locating for you where the local roads and residents lie. Members, you will note significant comments from Knoll Road to the north of the site. You'll also note, members, that access is to Willow Grove to the south of the site, and that the drainage strategy continues to propose discharge of attenuated waters to Willow Grove and to the Knoll Road riparian network. Next slide, please. This slide shows you the changes that occurred from a much earlier planning permission, PO 16/1725. We have, in fact, members, two planning approvals relating to this development. You'll see the earlier planning permission included a range of apartments across the site. In red, I've shown you where the changes occurred in the next planning application. Next slide, please, Emma. So there you are, members. You can see there's an introduction on plots 1 to 10 of independent detached bungalows. That was agreed under the planning application 2298 that we seek to vary today, members. On this plan, you will see, I'm asking you to note at this stage, the position of attenuation basins for drainage. You will note there are 4 small attenuation basins shown on this layout plan. I would add, members, there are 2 further attenuation basins to the north of the development on land attached via a Grampian condition, which were also part of the drainage strategy approved under this 2022 application. Next slide, please. Apologies, I've got a repeater there. I do apologise, Emma. Next one after that. Thank you. Proposed drainage layout. So here, members, you can see how the drainage strategy is proposed. You have the green areas outlined on this plan. So in the Willow Way drawing, the lower basin is shown, located in the southeast corner of the development. Note, members, a single basin here rather than the range of basins previously indicated on the approved drawing. And then to the right, members, you will notice to the northern area, the upper basin, which links to the Knoll Road network, you have a single drainage basin here. Emma, if we can take the next slide, that should show the difference between the approved drainage strategy and that we seek to revise today. So, members, noting to the left, the approved strategy, those 2 basins in the north, and then the 4 smaller basins located in and around the development within the application site. And again, members, to the right, the proposal today, a single larger basin in the southeast corner of the site, and a single basin in the north of the site. That is the drainage strategy in a nutshell, Chairman. If we can now turn to some photographs, please, Emma. So the photographs show the land drain to the west of the application site. This is the land drain which the northern drainage basin proposes to discharge into. You will notice, members, there is already a piped outfall that relates to the existing development at Sheringham House. Next slide, please. And again, this is the land to the south of the application and is the land to the rear of dwellings on Knoll Road and shows the riparian network as it exits the land under the applicant's ownership. Again, the drainage channel to the rear of the properties at Knoll Road. Next slide, please. Next slide shows you the site area as recently photographed, and you will notice, members, that there has been some tree felling on this area. We will bring the trees officer in to describe those issues shortly, but please note, members, that there has been felling to the northern area of the site adjacent to Knoll Road and those properties we highlighted on the plans earlier. Next slide, please, Emma. And here we have the existing development plots 1 to 10, which are taking place as we speak. They have a significant element of conditions discharge on plots 1 to 10, and the applicant today seeks variance to enable them to deliver phase 1 without any further breaches of planning control, to enable them to move forward and occupy those dwellings in phase 1. Next slide, please, Emma, and then we'll move to the key issues. So members, you can see there we have a raft of key issues. The issue of principal officers believe is resolved firstly by the allocation of this site in the existing local plan for housing, and also members, of course, the two previous approvals, one for apartments and one in 2022 for a very similar form of development. In terms of the matters of infrastructure and Section 106, affordable housing, those contributions remain exactly as they were previously. They are secured under an existing Section 106, and that Section 106 will apply to this application if you approve it in exactly the same way as it did to the 2022 application. The details are noted in the official report as to exactly what is provided through the Section 106. Means of access, members. You will see that the access to the site from the slides I've presented to you is vehicular access from Willow Grove. We will also see, members, that there is a pedestrian link to Knoll Road to the north and also to Morley Hill to the west. Those are provided under this scheme and they comply with the requirements of the local plan allocation and the previous planning applications. In terms of landscape, you'll note that we have no objections raised in terms of the woodland management plan, and that the tree officer will describe to you how further planting will take place under a Forestry Commission felling licence and also under the landscape planting conditions required. The trees are felled in relation to ash dieback and also some structural failings that resulted in a tree falling from the applicant's ownership onto adjacent land. Now, members, the key issue today I would suggest to you is the matter of drainage. The matter of drainage is considered against the approved strategy as I've described for you in 2022, where the principal issues related to the points of discharge to Willow Grove and Knoll Road. They remain exactly as that, Chairman. They are proposed to discharge to the same points as previously agreed. Under the previous approval, rates of discharge were agreed. It was agreed that we would see 3.1 litres per second to Willow Grove and 5.6 litres per second to Knoll Road. Chairman, those rates of discharge are achieved under the proposals in front of you today. They are the same rates of discharge. The capacity is again to the same design tolerances. These attenuation basins are designed to alleviate a 1 in 100 year flood event. In addition to that, as a result of climate warming, I'll get my words out, Chairman, as a result of climate warming, an additional 45% capacity is required on top of the 1 in 100 year capacity. Again, Chairman, I'm pleased to report to you that those capacities are achieved. Officers do understand the local concern, but we reiterate that flows over the site in rainfall events currently are unmitigated. There are no attenuation basins, Chairman. The proposals are designed to provide attenuation to ensure that in extreme rainfall events, the water is held back in the drainage basins rather than washing downhill onto the adjacent land and into the drainage channels which lay to the west and south of the application site. The proposals will deliver betterment over the unmitigated situation which currently exists on the application site. Anglian Water have maintained their agreement to take the runoff flows from this development into the shared sewer system that serves the Knoll Road riparian drain. The lead local flood authority have confirmed that the drainage strategy and flood risk meet their requirements. That strategy includes a future management and maintenance. The applicant has confirmed that they will maintain the riparian watercourse on their own land and that will be under a management company that will have a 125-year lease. That is the land to the west of the application site, the drain that you've seen on those photographs. Finally, Chairman, as a result of the most recent comments received by the Planning Authority, I have contacted the LLFA. They have advised that those who have riparian land drainage responsibilities for the land drain to Knoll Road would be expected to maintain the drain in a fit and proper state to enable discharges from the upstream to be received. Further, that after the circulation of questionnaires to local residents in relationship to a recent local flood episode, that no further action was required by the LLFA. Members, I report to you that the fallback position to deliver similar proposals under the existing permission granted under reference PF 22/1928 carries weight in your consideration today. Officers conclude that the proposed revisions are compliant with policies EN2, EN4, EN9 and EN10. In addition, the proposals will comply with the transport policies CT5 and 6. And finally, members, I underline that paragraph 11 of the MPPF requires the local authority to employ a positive tilted balance where housing proposals are considered. This is a local plan allocation. These proposals will unlock this allocation and will allow 62 new dwellings to be released against the identified shortfall of housing land in North Norfolk. For these reasons, members, the recommendation from officers is for approval, and it is subject to the detailed conditions to be agreed, which will cover the subject heads on pages 28 and 29 of your agenda. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Ryerson. Very clearly explained. We now go to speakers. I have no town council speaker. I have two objecting speakers. We can start with Lauren Taylor Brown, please. To the end there. You have 3 minutes and it is timed.
Okay, thank you. Does it start now? Okay. Thank you. I'm a resident of Knoll Road, which, as you can see, neighbours the northern boundary of the site. I wish to draw your attention to the residents' objections to the revised drainage strategy. Since the development of Sheringham House in the 90s, over 35 properties have experienced flooding of gardens and outbuildings, issues that long-term residents say simply did not exist before. We sent photos to members showing the severity of the flooding earlier this week. This is not only during heavy rainfall, it persists through summer. It does not rain for 2 weeks now, and there is still standing water today. There is an issue with drainage on the site, which is making the problems much worse for us. The new proposal is to collect surface runoff into the basin and discharge it into the culvert that goes around the back of our gardens. The culvert is an open stream that carries natural spring water to the sea. As you saw in the photos, it is already extremely overwhelmed and cannot take any more water. Anglia Water have said in their pre-planning report that they will not adopt the culvert as it's too risky. It runs through people's gardens and it's close to our homes. It has, though, given the green light to connect to its sewer network. This is a solution that will work and will not flood the residents. The developer has also told residents that he wants to use the sewers. So why do the proposals use the culvert? This is not clear. The proposal places the responsibility of managing surface runoff from the site onto local residents, the majority of which are elderly and retired. The developer has no obligations to do anything to mitigate this, even though he's effectively using our gardens as a soakaway. The issue will get worse as the site is tarmacked and the impact of complete deforestation, as you've seen on the photo, comes to bear. The reports on the planning portal regarding drainage simply do not show a true reflection of what's happening on the ground. The LLFA say that the new proposal has numerous discrepancies and a lack of detail, and it doesn't mention the culvert on Knoll Road at all. Despite this, the LLFA says that it should work on paper. In view of the very serious historic problems, this is not enough. The developer should come with a fully detailed scheme that can be shown to work, backed by calculations. The LLFA also say that there'll be a 5 cubic metre betterment, but all they have done to get to this figure is to state what the capacity is of the basin, 5 cubic metres. There are no calculations in respect of the land north of the site. There is simply not enough technical information, and for that reason, councillors, you're not in a position today to make a rational decision and satisfy yourselves that no material impact will be made on neighbouring homes, and that the SUDS will do what it is meant to do, which is reduce, not increase flood risk in the area. Please defer the decision today and make the developer do the necessary independent analysis. And please also come to the roads yourselves for a site visit to see it. Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity.
I have a second speaker, Samuel Heath. Come to the microphone, please.
I speak today as a concerned member of the public and on behalf of a close family member who lives immediately north of the site on Knoll Road. I am here to raise serious concerns about the unlawful extension of the development into a woodland area clearly excluded from the approved red line boundary, apart from a narrow footpath. Despite this, construction vehicles and large-scale groundworks have been allowed there in clear breach of planning conditions and professional advice. Large volumes of the soil have been dumped and graded across the woodland, causing irreversible damage to what is classified as a priority habitat. The area formed part of an important ecological corridor linking to the wider Cromer Ridge landscape, as highlighted in both the policy EN2 regarding the North Norfolk Landscape Character Assessment and Chapter 15 of the NPPF. The protected trees under the tree preservation order have been felled or damaged beyond what the felling licence permitted. The footpath subbase was laid without any care for the remaining venerable trees, and no effort has been made to restock or protect what's left. There are also significant concerns regarding flood risk. The variation of Condition 27, Flood Risk Assessment and Drainage Strategy, indicates an attenuation basin placed within the woodland without any compensation for the resulting loss of 14% of the habitat. Moreover, the proposed basin offers no measurable biodiversity enhancements, contravening core strategy policy SS4, the environment. No successful infiltration testing has been undertaken. The groundwater monitoring point south of Knoll Road, WS04, recorded groundwater just 100 millimetres below the surface. Given that this existing culvert already struggles with pre-development water levels, I'm increasingly sceptical of the suitability of any drainage scheme that proposes to retain or manage additional water in this area. These actions breach multiple conditions of the planning permission, PF 221928. Condition 3, the arboricultural impact assessment, where the tree protection of the north of the site and associated construction exclusion zone have not been maintained. This should also be revised to address the full extent of the development, the blue line boundary. Condition 7, parts of the construction environmental management plan haven't been followed, especially concerning tree protection and ground clearance in section 6. This should also require revision to consider the full extent of the development. Condition 18, the woodland footpath has been partly built without approved plans. Condition 28, construction and drainage works have been started without an agreed phasing plan, risking damage to the woodland and the flooding of neighbouring properties. This situation reflects a worrying pattern of disregard for both planning conditions and the surrounding environment. And I urge the committee to pause all works in the woodland, enforce compliance, and require full restoration of the damage done. Thank you.
Thank you. I have two supporting speakers. Let's begin with Richard Davis. You're not going to speak. Okay, so Lisa Soderberg then. You'll have 6 minutes, yes.
Sorry, I'm just going to set my timer because I'm not the best at keeping to time. Right. My name is Åsa Söderberg. I'm a senior associate at Stantec UK with 25 years experience in providing consultancy services, flood risk and drainage to inform land development, supporting planning applications and planning appeals. I work closely with various statutory authorities and provide a drainage engineering support role for Horsham District Council. The Sheringham House site proposes to build 62 retirement dwellings on a site allocated for residential development in the Council's adopted site allocation development plan document. The site benefits from a full extent planning permission. This variation or condition application seeks to vary the planning condition from that full permission. The acceptability of this application should consider the specific variation of the condition proposed and not the principle of the retirement dwellings. The variation to the condition include the phasing of certain conditions to ensure timely delivery of much needed retirement housing in Sheringham and reference to updated plans. One of the conditions this application is seeking to vary is condition 27, which controls the flood risk assessment and drainage strategy for the site, which the development must accord with. An updated flood risk assessment and drainage strategy has been prepared by Conisbee, dated 10th of December 2024, version 2, which has been submitted in support of this variational condition application, which includes all necessary drainage calculations. The drainage principles remain the same, with the drainage designed to the same discharge rates, same attenuation storage volumes. However, the previously underground storage tank proposed have been replaced with an open attenuation feature for the southern catchment. The discharge rates as agreed in the full permission restricts the total runoff to 8.6 litres per second, of which 3.1 litres discharge to the south and 5.5 to the north, compared with the 1 in 1 year Greenfield runoff rate, which is 9.56 litres per second. The proposed drainage strategy provides a 10% betterment for these smaller, more frequent events. For the 1 in 100 year storm events, including climate change, the proposal is providing a 78% betterment in the discharge rate to the downstream watercourse to the north. This will reduce flood risk downstream, subject to adjacent landowners fulfilling their riparian responsibilities to maintain the watercourse that flows through their land. This amendment aligned with the Norfolk County Council Lead Local Flood Authority Guidance Document version 7.3, updated in April this year, which state that approaches to manage surface water that takes into account water quantity, i.e. flooding, water quality, such as pollution, amenity and biodiversity issues are collectively referred to as sustainable drainage. These are the 4 pillars of such design. The Lead Local Flood Authority require that all 4 pillars of such design are delivered to be classed as SUDs, and the Conisbee drainage design is now fully compliant with this requirement. A detailed SUDS management and maintenance plan, including maintenance schedule, is also providing detailing the ongoing maintenance required for all the drainage infrastructure. Sutherland Homes will be responsible for undertaking the maintenance of all proposed drainage for the lifetime of the development, and future residents will contribute towards the cost of maintenance through an annual service charge. For further context, the Conisbee assessment separates the drainage scheme between phase 1, which relates to plots 1 and 2 of the bungalows, and phase 2, which relates to the delivery of our apartment blocks. The drainage design for phase 1 and 2 can be delivered independently of each other. This will ensure timely delivery of phase 1 and the scheme phase 1 of the scheme, and the principle of phasing the planning conditions between phase 1 and 2 has been found acceptable in principle as part of this committee report. The applicant has been through extensive consultation with the Lead Local Flood Authority, who concludes that the LLFA is generally satisfied that sufficient information has been submitted to recommend the variation of condition 27, and their recommendation is as follows. The LLFA has no objection to this application for removal or variation of a condition following grant of planning permission. The application has been deferred to the Development Committee following a referral to committee from the adjacent ward member, as set out in the committee report. The local member concerns reported in the call-in notification are respectfully considered to be already managed to officer satisfaction. And as a reminder, the LLFA have considered this revised assessment in detail and are not objecting to the variation of condition 27. If it was the case that the proposed variation will increase any issues of flood risk in the local area, the LLFA, as statutory consultee, would not have lifted their objection. The site itself is located in the town of Sheringham, with over a third of people aged 65 and over. This is set in a context whereby planning practice guidance tells us that the need to provide housing for older people is critical. The PPG also reminds us why it's important to plan with the housing needs for older people, explaining that offering older people the better choice of accommodation to suit their changing needs can help them live independently for longer, feel more connected to the communities, and help reduce costs to the social care and health systems. Approving this application will see timely delivery of high quality retirement housing in Sheringham. The applicant, Sutherland Homes, has a track record of building successful retirement communities elsewhere in North Norfolk. That's right.
Yep.
That was nearly on. Thank you.
And we now move to the adjacent local member, Councillor Withington. 5 minutes.
Thank you for the opportunity to represent my two fellow ward councillors and the residents of Sheringham on this important application. And particularly thank you for considering this and allowing the call into committee as well, given the level of concern expressed by residents. And I think it's important that their views are heard and they feel that they have had their chance to have their say as part of a democratic process. So my presentation refers to the flood damage, the flood drainage and landscape conditions that are being amended today. Residents in Knoll Road, Knoll Crescent, Woodland Rise and surrounding areas broadly support the principle of development at Sheringham House. However, they believe Sutherland Homes must meet their legal obligation to ensure the works do not harm local homes, infrastructure or the environment. Given this is an application for revisions to an already approved scheme, residents stress that the changes now under review are more complex and impactful than may have previously been understood or expected. The most pressing concern for residents is flooding and drainage. Since the original development at Sheringham House, residents have experienced worsening flooding, including waterlogged gardens, flooded gardens, and regular surface flooding of the road. These issues were not present before the original development began and have dramatically escalated since the large-scale removal of trees on site, including areas outside the approved planning boundary. Natural water attenuation has been lost and the situation has worsened even during periods of low rainfall, highlighting a critically high water table. Recent images show garden ponds created as a last resort to manage standing water with water at surface level on dry record-breaking months such as March. Sutherland Homes proposes to drain the development via a culvert that passes through 10 residential gardens. However, there's been no apparent assessment of the culvert's capacity and no clarity on what the betterment is being claimed in the drainage reports for this area. Residents ask better than what? Better than pre-development? Better than their tree removal? There is no clear baseline or indication of measurable benefit to existing homes, which continue to suffer from flooding and elevated risk as climate change increases and rainfall intensity increases. Anglian Water has confirmed it will not adopt the culvert due to its location and has confirmed that a connection to the main sewer is possible. The only reason not to pursue this safer alternative appears to be cost, which raises ethical concerns, especially when the developer seeks to pass responsibility onto homeowners without oversight, control or maintenance plans himself for the culvert and forcing local residents to deal with increased water through a riparian watercourse. Residents also highlight planning breaches, including the construction of attenuation bases and dwellings before permission was granted and damage to remaining trees and the felling of trees beyond approved areas. This history raises concerns about Sutherland Homes' ability and willingness to follow conditions and maintain proper drainage or forestry practices going forward. The residents feel quite strongly, therefore, and they urge the following steps. In an ideal situation, they would like to request Sutherland Homes to connect surface water drainage to the Anglian Water sewer network and not the culvert. If this isn't possible, they would ask that a revised drainage strategy with an independent report assessing culvert capacity and local impact, which also includes the impact on Knoll Road and Woodland Rise Grove areas, as a result of a phased development and how that changes the drainage system. Updated plans reflecting tree removal, forestry commission obligations and flood risk to homes. and confirmation from the landscape officer that tree and drainage plans are aligned and enforceable. Finally, residents would really like to see a site visit by this committee before decision, and the local lead for LLFA to witness the impact first and consider truly whether this drainage system does address the issues. Approving amendments based solely on modelling or developer assurances rather than the lived reality of residents would be deeply irresponsible, in my view. Let common sense and a duty to residents guide your decision within planning guidelines.
Sorry, Liz, stop you there.
That's right, finished.
Okay, thank you. Okay, a number of issues have been raised, and it might be useful to clarify one or two with officers before we go into debate. Clearly, there is some concern about how the trees and have been managed and the impact. Give comment on that first, please.
So the land is covered by a tree preservation order, an area order, and that covers all trees that are there at the time the order was served, and I think that was in 2000. There has been a subsequent felling licence along the Poplar Elm Grove, which was a conifer plantation, and then more recently another felling licence that covers a lot of it's quite wet woodland where the path sort of cuts through to the north at Knoll Road, where I think you can actually see on some of the aerial maps there's quite extensive ash dieback. The woodland management plans that have been submitted as part of the application have slightly different species mix to the felling licence obligation. They have recommended species that are more adaptable to wet woodland habitat types, so willow, poplar, alder. The Forestry Commission felling licence has more oak and some other broadleaf species mixed in with that, but broadly speaking, the felling licence and the Forestry Commission have been up to site and are comfortable with what's happened and the proposals being put forward. We have had a series of applications coming forward from Sutherland House where tree work is necessary, and I'm comfortable that they are submitting works in compliance with the tree preservation order obligations. There is extensive replacement and restocking to do, and undoubtedly it has had an impact on all of the issues that have been raised this morning. It will be an ongoing process to see this re-established. It's not going to be an easy or fast fix.
Okay, thank you. Jonathan, anything to add in particular relating to, I think, the responsibilities of riparian owners of the watercourses?
Thank you, Chairman. This is a scheme which leans heavily on a previous approval, as I've described. Both of these considerations rely upon the riparian responsibilities of those who are downstream of the development site. The principle that we're looking to achieve here is that the attenuation of this development will arrive at nil detriment to those that are downstream. If the proposals are considered by members to arrive at nil detriment, as they previously did, then it is reasonable for members to rely on the riparian responsibilities of those who are part of the Knoll Road network that lies to the north of this site. As we've described, officers have secured agreement with Anglian Water for Anglian Water to take the remaining development proposals discharge into the sewer. So the issue is for members to consider. Does the proposal arrive at nil detriment? I've returned to the lead local flood authority after receiving further objections after the agenda was published, Chairman, and I can confirm for you that the LLFA have confirmed that they stand by their earlier decision and they stand by their consultation response. They agree that the proposals arrive at least nil detriment and will arrive at some element of betterment in terms of immediate surface water runoff. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. And just to confirm that the fallback position is the drainage system as permissioned in 2022.
Exactly that, Chairman. We've provided those plans. They're in the report. They're on the screen for you, Chairman, members, and there is your consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Debate, members. Councillor Adams.
So, well, thank you to all who spoke first of all. I am one of those councillors that didn't receive the emails concern that you mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, and that might be the case for Councillor Boyle as well. We're obviously substitutes.
I believe they were sent to all standard members.
Yeah, I can imagine that's fairly typical of what I used to see when I was a committee member here. I've got a number of questions, but can I ask first of all, were those emails considered by officers as part of the process in looking at the application? Or was their arrival quite late in the process?
Chairman, the emails, there are 11 letters of objection received via email after the agenda was published. I've described to you, Chairman, that I've returned to the LLFA. The LLFA have described that they have no further comments relating to those letters of objection. Further, in terms of the lobbying email, I forwarded the lobbying email within the bundle of information to the LLFA subsequent to the publishing of this report, and the LLFA, as I described earlier, Chairman, confirmed that they have no reason to revise their report after the receipt of both the late objections to the planning application and the lobbying email. Thank you, Chairman.
So just to confirm, then they don't bring up any new issues that weren't known about earlier on during the consideration of the application.
For your information, Chairman, the objections raise matters of surface water flooding. The applicant has provided 3 sets of revisions to the strategy through this proposal. There have been lengthy discussions with the LLFA throughout this matter. The issue has not been treated lightly by officers, the LLFA, or indeed the applicant. The issue that has arrived is a further video showing flood risk that occurred in a single event. That flood risk event was exactly the matter that was referred to the LLFA that I referred to earlier on, Chairman, where the LLFA issued 35 questionnaires to local residents. As a result of that investigation, the LLFA have confirmed that they will take no further action as a result of that surface water flood risk. As I say, Chairman, the LLFA have also seen the lobbying email and the objections received. So from that point of view, we have no further considerations on those issues raised.
So you've already answered my next question, which was to be whether the LLFA have carried out any investigations, and I presume from what everyone's been saying, there's been no internal flooding of property or sheds or outbuildings. Just from what everyone's saying, but it'd be helpful if someone could confirm that.
Exactly that, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. In terms of the maintenance of the culvert, the conditions there, I'm presuming we're talking about simple riparian responsibilities. Can I ask, how do those responsibilities practically change as a result of this development? What impacts will there be in terms of maintenance obligations on those residents? Because I appreciate we're talking about something that exists already, but I'm interested to learn a little bit more about how the work those residents has to do might increase. Thank you.
Chairman, I'm a planning officer. I'm not a legal expert. The issue of riparian drainage is a matter of civil law. From my experience, I would expect that the riparian rights of those downstream and their responsibilities remain exactly the same. I can only speak of the applicant's actions following this application. And as I described to you, Chairman and members, the applicant describes a situation where they will secure their section of the riparian network under a management company, and that will be a 125-year lease and will be managed in an appropriate standard.
Okay. Do you have any legal comment on riparian responsibilities? No. Yes, I'm putting on the spot there. Fairly obscure area of law, I think. Okay. Well, next. Very quiet. Yes, Councillor Bowling.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Firstly, I'd just like to thank the case officer for the comprehensive presentation this morning, but also everyone who has commented on this application thus far. Really important to get a device understanding of the situation. I was quite disturbed to see the cutting down of those trees. It is encouraging, obviously, that we've got a landscape and woodland management plan coming forward, and the tree expert stating that they're comfortable with that going forwards. Can I just get clarification on one point? I don't believe it's noted within the report. Does the 10% BNG legislation apply to this application?
Yeah, so because this is an application for a reserved matters application, i.e. a variation of a previous permission, the BNG legislation does not apply to this, as it didn't apply to the previous scheme.
If I could add, I think members can be reliant on the restocking notice under the Forestry Commission and the landscaping plan. There will be a significant amount of tree planting that will follow.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. That's it for now.
Yes, Councillor Day.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just looking at the LLFA annex to which we've referred about the variation condition. It says their review's been pragmatic and proportionate, and sounds a bit tiny bit lukewarm to me. And it says that the variation wording has not been submitted for consideration. Is that correct? Or am I have I missed something this morning?
Chairman, the outstanding issue with the LLFA in this matter is the delivery of a phasing plan, which is to be delivered under a conditions discharge matter, which is separate, which is a separate planning application. So the LLFA require a phasing plan to be delivered, which will show the delivery of the attenuation basins through phase 1 and phase 2. My understanding from discussion with the applicant for members' benefit is that the attenuation basins will be delivered at the earliest stage of those developments.
So the LLFA had all the information they needed to make that statement?
Chairman, I received an email at less than 22:41 last night from the LLFA, which said exactly that. Thank you.
Yes, Councillor Fish to it.
Mr. Chairman, I think it's time that somebody bit the bullet. It is complicated. I can remember this application coming up several times in the past. It is difficult, and I do understand the concerns in respect of surface water in particular, and in Sheringham, because I know that there are various becks that lead down through into the Anglian water treatment bit at the bottom of just by the Crown. I can't remember the right phrase of it, but I do think we've had Anglian Water looking at this. We've had the lead local flood authority looking at this. And I think officers have done an extremely detailed investigation into this and have come up with what I believe to be a sensible recommendation. It has all sorts of additional approval subject to, which I would agree with, but I am happy to propose that this is accepted subject to all the conditions.
Thank you, Councillor Fitch to it. Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Fisher. Anybody else wish to speak? Councillor Brown. It's waiting for you.
So all of a sudden there's an atmosphere of expectation. I don't know why. Yeah, good morning, everybody. This scheme, although doubtless is an improvement on the 1922 planning permission fallback position, effectively does acknowledge that that consent and the arrangements within it can be improved. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here this morning. I'm a little bit nervous when Anglian Water are involved in opting out of adoption in the hope and expectation that private landowners and with riparian rights, they cause me to shudder slightly because I know that in our area, generally in North Norfolk, riparian rights and their interpretation and interplay with surface water discharges is a minefield in a number of areas which I have personally experienced. I am aware that another development in Sheringham has involved lengthy involvement with our enforcement team over drainage issues and flooding, not least because a lot of Sheringham is on a geographical slope from higher land down to the coast. I also am aware that management companies, by and large, of all descriptions, do seem to receive a less than favourable press in the way that they operate. What I do see here, and I may be wrong, I'm quite happy to be corrected, is Sutherland Homes, the applicant, sort of washing their hands and walking away from a management company and an arrangement whereby the management company, the riparian rights on the adjacent privately owned landowner land, and also on site through a service charge. It's not clear what will happen if the operator of that management company changes for whatever reason. Companies don't always endure the full perpetuity period of 80 years. We know that. So that is a concern that I have here, and I really need that to be addressed before I feel I can support it.
Okay, I think the best person to answer any question on the management company might be the agent or the applicant. Yes, you want to come to the front so we can all hear, especially those at home on the live stream. It's important we have all the information in front of us as to how this will work.
Hello, everybody. The last 30 odd years, I've built a lot of apartments, and particularly Sheringham House. And when we have 125 years of leasehold, every resident of every apartment or each apartment or a bungalow has a share. It's a shareholding in the management company. So if I disappear, which one day I'm going to at my age, and they still own all of the shares. So they will have to deal with it. And this is common policy with most big apartment blocks, such as I'm doing, and particularly with McCarthy and Stone and things like that. So if you're minded to think, well, what will happen? Yeah, they will. And they pay an annual fee for gardeners, which we have at Sheringham House, and they look after, which I think Imogen knows how we operate there. If there's a trees down and they fall into the beck or whatever, or the ditch, that's what they're paid to do. And that is 125 years of shareholders lease. After that, I can't look forward, but that's what we do, and that's what will happen on this site. So 125 years, if I fall out of it, or Sutherland Homes, then there's always people stepping up as residents, yeah, to take over the running of it. And that's about, unless there's any other questions on that, that's what will happen to this application for the purchasers of the bungalows and of the apartments.
Okay, thank you.
Chair, can I just ask if
Yes.
those residents will be, sorry, I'm here.
Sorry.
So that you can see me.
Sorry.
I mean, obviously that service charge contribution will vary greatly if there is a legal dispute between the management company and the riparian landowners over the functioning of the culverting, etc., and the efficiency of the attenuation plants. But you know, it's putting an onus upon individual landowners. It's almost like passing the buck, if I'm honest.
I've read a lot about this, and basically, about a few years ago, we actually went and helped 2 or 3 elderly people to clean the ditches out. Yeah. So basically, it's the responsibility, which, as you know or mentioned, the whole of Sheringham, there's various sites, and particularly Edgebrook, which had the same problem. But since I did that about 30 years ago, we've never had a problem with flooding there ever. Yeah, and it's maintained, and that is what will happen. And unfortunately, riparian rights, people need to clean out their ditches. I mean, you know, we can't get involved with that unless they ask us to do it. Yeah, and you know, we have a team where you've got elderly residents. Yeah, but you know, where do you stop? We've just got to say you've got to do it. Yeah.
Okay, I think we're going off a bit of a tangent here now. I think we understand how management will operate. So we'll
yes,
unless you have anything new to add, Councillor Brown, we'll move on. Conscious of time.
Yeah, I think I'm done, Chair.
So we'll take Councillor Hankins, then we'll go to the vote.
Thank you, Mr.
You want to
Chairman.
come in brief?
Question for the presenter. As I understand it, does this organisation qualify as a common hold organisation and do the residents or shareholders in that common hold determine the service charge?
Yeah, the applicant just said no to that
Sorry?
question. The applicant just responded no to that question. It's not.
And resident on annual trading. 60 odd people there, I always like people not banned, but we've never had any 30 or so we the management companies are non-profit.
Yeah, okay, I think we understand that.
All right, understand. Thank you.
Mr. Williams. We'll get to him. Okay, Councillor Allen.
Me first, yeah. You know, I appreciate, you know, a lot of the concerns with the application have been civil in nature with the riparian responsibilities and just talking about the management company there. I would say I'm not 100% of the way there at the moment in terms of what I've heard, just because of, well, I've been around long enough actually to see applications approved by the lead local flood authority that have flooded. You know, I do want to always look to make sure that where there are concerns that they are looking at these properly, frankly. Sorry to be a little bit blunt about some of that work, but you know, it's my experience at least. Can I just ask then, in terms of the flooding that has been reported, was there a reason given as to why that wasn't investigated? I just want to try and determine whether that has any bearing here in terms of changes as a result of the development. I accept actually, you know, I wanted to say in respect of developments carried out by this developer, you know, I've been inside them, they're always very high quality internally. So obviously we're not here to discuss those elements. I'm concerned about those potential flood risks. So I just want to try and be comforted that they don't exist, perhaps to the extent of which we've heard this morning. Thank you.
Williams.
I'll just comment briefly on the management company bit and then leave that last part to Mr. Rowson to pick up on. So whatever one's views of the planning system nationally, and this is a general comment rather than something specific to this application, I should observe, we're not in a position where we can preclude management companies' service charges as being part of the long-term maintenance and delivery strategy. It is commonplace. I cannot sit here and tell you you can take a position which dislikes management companies and service charge, therefore you can oppose this development. They are commonplace, they are standard practice. Yes, they're not always got the greatest reputation in some circles nationally, but we have to accept they're part of the suite of things that manages facilities going forward. But I will hand over to Mr. Rowson on the specifics of Councillor Adams's last point.
Mr. Rowson.
Through you, Chairman. I can't speak for the LLFA, but I was fortunate enough to attend a meeting with the LLFA, Councillor Withington and Councillor Hynek as part of the referral process. At that meeting, the LLFA very clearly said they had sent out 35 questionnaires to local residents. They said that one questionnaire was returned to them as part of that process. As part of their investigations, they then said to Councillor Hynek, Councillor Withington and myself that they did not progress this particular issue because no property had been flooded. The flooding related to garden areas only and had not flooded any dwelling. Thank you.
Thank you. No further comments? Okay, we'll go to the vote. I'll remind you that we're looking at approving the variations of conditions, and that on to vote there is a fallback position that the previous drainage system could of course be built. We're looking at working on the variations as set out in your papers. Can we take a vote, please?
Can I ask councillors to use their microphones so that people live streaming can hear? Thank you. Councillor Beatty.
Abstain.
Councillor Brown.
With reservation for.
Councillor Fisher.
For.
Councillor Fitch-Tillett. For.
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 Councillor Mancini Boyle. Not present. Councillor Netherway.
For.
Councillor Adams.
For.
Councillor Boyle.
For.
Councillor Varley.
For.
Councillor Vickers. For. Twelve for and one abstention.
Okay, the application is approved. Thank you. We'll take the Fakenham one now. And able for Punch out to get away as soon as possible. And we'll take a break after that.
What could go against it, what could go for it?
Yeah.
I've got some experience with conflict.
Yeah, I couldn't, yeah.
Pleasantly surprised at them. As well.
Yeah, flood.
Yeah, well,
Couldn't vote for it.
but overriding it, it's new property.
Yeah, no.
And we're short of housing. It is an issue, no question about it. What I can't understand, Tim, is why.
The people who actually sponsor the drains, they keep people in them all the time, the farms. apologies for the delay. We're just waiting for Officer Croxton to come to return. No, I'm advised we should move on, so we will. Officer Smith, would you care to present on this? So it's the PF 241079, one we've had before. Just, sorting ourselves out with a legal issue on it. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members. I've got two updates. First of all, we had a representation received yesterday. Some members may, or some all, or some may have been copied into the representation. In summary, in case you haven't, in summary, it refers to paragraph 97 of the NPPF and its contents of the addendum report. It also refers to the sustainability and transportation reference in the NPPF. It raises questions over the accuracy of the site description, the evidence base for employment provision of 120 jobs, whether or not the conditions should be bullet pointed or fully written out for the purposes of the members, and whether or not there's been enough efforts made to consider measures to overcome any concerns of development as in regards to more information put in a legal agreement in section 106. Officers consider this doesn't change the recommendation of the planning application going forward, so we have considered those. The second update is Fakenham Town Council now object to the application on the basis that the application is too close to schools. So the application is for a McDonald's drive-through and restaurant, including car parking, landscaping and associated works. Slide. In terms of the location, the site is located at the rear of the Lidl supermarket in Holt along Fakenham Road, or road in Fakenham. The site is currently fenced off and unused and is surrounded by commercial, employment and industrial development. The site is located on a designated employment site. However, the site has an extant permission for 3 retail units with a floor area of 1,545 square metres, and this was approved in 2006 as part of the Lidl application. Next slide, please. I'll just go through a series of photographs just showing the context of the site and its surroundings. This view is looking south towards the Lidl, where the Lidl will be, the McDonald's will be to the rear of the site. This is the access that will be used to access it from the main road. The hedgerow to the east will be retained. Next slide, please. Again, this is further looking into the site, just giving a detail of the context, and you will see that the commercial and employment development sort of surrounding the site. Next slide, please. Yeah, again, a further view looking southwest showing part of the Lidl car park, Haynes Daniels, and what was the Linda McCartney factory. Again, a further view from in and around the car parking showing the employment and commercial development. Next slide, please. I have some views inside the site. Again, you see scrubland, hedgerows, commercial development surrounding it. Next slide, please. And again, it's the same. This is of the inside of the site with the scrubland and commercial development. Next slide, please. Yeah, and then the next slide, please. Yeah. So in terms of the post site, the McDonald's rest will be located to the rear south of the application site, and it proposes 55 car parking spaces, 2 grill bays, 2 accessible spaces, 10 cycle spaces, including charging points. The external floor area measures some 377 square metres, with a dining area of 92 square metres, and it can have approximately 79 seats and covers, including an external dining area. The application also proposes to expand upon and enhance the landscaping surrounding the site, including retaining existing hedgerow to the east of the application site. The next slide, please. The application proposes a single-storey building of more contemporary design using timber cladding, horizontal grey cladding and including grey brick, which is a corporate approach and is considered acceptable in the context of the site. The building does include a higher parapet, and this will screen the extraction and general equipment associated with the restaurant. Next slide, please. In terms of the floor plan, Again, very consistent with a McDonald's restaurant. There is a dining area where much of the building used the back office, kitchen, store, etc. Next slide, please. Now, members will note the officer report and addendum on pages 31 to 49 of the committee report. It details the application in full, local representations, including parish and other consultees. The following is a list of main considerations contained within that report. There are no outstanding consultee objections to the scheme, subject to condition, though I will discuss some further elements of the application going forward for the benefit of the members and anyone who wasn't here previously. Next slide, please. So in terms of the location, the proximity to town centre and general principle of development, the site is within a designated employment site. So there is conflict with core strategy policy SS5 because the proposal is for a restaurant takeaway and not a B class use, which is an office, industrial storage distribution facility. However, in assessing the application, the officers have had regard to the existing permission of 1,545 square metres of retail floor space that could be built out. Additionally, officers would have to undertake what is a sequential assessment as part of the application, where we have to consider whether there are any sequentially preferable sites close to the town centre. This has been undertaken and we consider this to be a sequentially acceptable site. The application also proposes a minimum of 120 jobs and offers significant economic benefits. So therefore, the officers consider the economic benefits of the scheme, including the extant permission, are sufficient to outweigh the loss of a designated employment site. Could you just go back a slide for me, briefly? In terms of other areas of the application, things such as ecological impacts, arboricultural, impact on landscape countermeasures, these are all considered acceptable by officers. In relation to issues surrounding noise, litter, there was representations made in respect to environmental health concerns. Further studies have been submitted in terms of noise. We have agreed operating hours. So there are no further outstanding environmental health considerations as part of the application, and anything relevant could be subject to planning conditions. There were concerns related to highways impacts. Sorry, can we go forward 2 slides for me, please? That's it. So I've included some photographs of the entrance along Holt Road. So this is looking northeast. The next photograph will attach will be going southwest. Yeah. Yeah, the Highways Authority have raised no objection to the application. And they have regard to the extant permission, which is 3 retail units on the site. There are highways improvements proposed, considering drop curbs and tactile paving. So essentially, the Highways Authority raised no further objection to the scheme. Can you go forward a slide, please? Yeah, this shows the locations along Greenway Lane and Holt Road where additional highway works will be considered as part of or conditioned as part of any subsequent planning approval if granted. Can you go to the next slide, please? In respect to paragraph 97. So paragraph 97 states that local planning authority should refuse applications for hot food takeaways or outlets within walking distance of schools and other places where children and young people congregate unless the location is within a designated town centre, or in locations where there is evidence that a concentration of such uses is having an adverse impact on local health, pollution and antisocial behaviour. In terms of Part A of paragraph 97, the National Planning Policy Framework and the Planning Policy Guidance does not define walking distance. There are documentation such as the National Design Guide or Manual for Streets that refer to an 800-metre distance. There's also a document published by Public Health England that refers to a 400-metre walking distance. Could you go to the next slide, please? The following map provides a radius of both 400 and 800 metres from the application site. And as it's clear that all 4 schools are well outside of this walking distance. Part A also refers to other places where children congregate. Given the site and its surrounding, other places where children congregate are more located closer and more towards the town centre of Fakenham. In respect to Part B of paragraph 79, this refers to in locations where there is evidence that a concentration of such uses is having an adverse impact on local health, pollution, or antisocial behaviour. Again, a review of the surrounding area indicates that a concentration of fast food takeaways and outlets are again located in Fakenham town centre. There is no evidence of such concentration of uses surrounding the application site. The illustration again, next slide please, details the 4 schools of Fakenham, the town centre and the application site, and all 4 schools are actually located closer to the town centre. There is no evidence provided to demonstrate that the proposal would have an adverse impact on our health, or pollution or antisocial behaviour, and there is no objection to our mental health. In respect to paragraph 79, officers consider that the proposal accords with this paragraph and there be no justified need for refusal in this regard. Next slide, please. The officer conclusion summary remains the same as previously brought to you on March the 6th, outlined on the presentation. The application is before members to, though, however, consider the application afresh and as a whole, which also now includes an assessment of paragraph 97. Next slide, please. Again, application is recommended for approval subject to the imposition of relevant conditions and a section 106 that considers that's requesting monies over a 15-year period for the maintenance and contribution towards litter bins. I can confirm that the 6 litter bins have been agreed by the applicant, including an approximate £18,000. The section 106 is moving forward. It's been signed by Lidl, though it's obviously subject to the committee resolution. There's a small progress just remaining. Thank you and welcome any questions.
Thank you. I have speakers, no town council speaker. I have Donna Clark, objecting speaker. I believe she is withdrawn. No supporting speaker. You're the local member, are you, Councillor Vickers? Or it's South of Punjab will speak.
I'm not going to vote on this. All I would say is that to reiterate that there are concerns around traffic in the area, and I don't think the slide that showed the roads leading up to Lidl was very clear. It was very faint, but there is a very, very tricky junction where that white car is at Crossroads. However, on the whole, I welcome this application for its economic benefits, but I am going to continue to work with Highways if this is approved to make sure there are some mitigations in place.
Councillor Punchard.
Thank you, Chair. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to attend the previous committee meeting, so now have the opportunity to speak. So just to run through a few of the issues that have been discussed and my views on them. One was around the types of vehicles, i.e. HGV movements in the area near to housing. I'm fortunate or unfortunate enough to have lived in Fakenham and in the close proximity for a number of years yet and remember the previous establishment before Lidl's, which was a Rainbow co-op supermarket, and Garden Centre, which at the time was the only supermarket in Fakenham. We're now fortunate enough to have 4 supermarkets. So the traffic flow and HGV movement in that area, there's been a net gain over the years. So I don't see that would be particular impactful. The hours of operation have been previously discussed, and I believe have been amended to suit limited hours. So that impact is no longer there. The bonus is it will create 120 jobs for the local economy or circa that arena, which is very valuably important. And the flexibility of those jobs that they're looking to employ may suit many of the local residents. It's development of a brownfield site, which, as we know, is always a benefit to do such a thing. And we are seen as one of the main growing market towns within the district, and as such, you would expect such development to come through. Regards to the walking to schools, the closest school is the infant school. I would have foreseen, you know, the types of users of McDonald's may well be the teenage years from the high school, and that is quite some distance as it's been identified by the officer in the site. What hasn't been stated or mentioned previously is around the vast number of people in the Fakenham area who currently make dedicated journeys to Cromer, Dereham, Swaffham, Kings Lynn, McDonald's, and benefit those towns by, you know, knock-on things when they're in those localities, where those people will now be retained in the town and using the town facilities. As you can see from the site, there's no real visual impact. As I said before, it was a large steel-clad supermarket many years ago, you know, reaching sort of 3 stories in height. So in fact, you know, there's no impact whatsoever with a single-story building at the back of that site. And the last one, whilst I share Councillor Vickers' concerns around highways on Holt Road, I think I'd be, you know, more vehement about it if McDonald's were developing at the front of the site right next to the highway. You'd feel it would be incumbent of them to do something, but in fairness to them, as their development is at the rear of a site, you're asking them to do something on land that they're not in control of or next to or abutting. However, I have made my feelings clear to the local county councillor, as does Councillor Vickers, and certainly would welcome any further improvements such as a pedestrian crossing on the Holt Road further south west in effect, which would help slow the traffic naturally. As Councillor Vickers has said, there is a natural pinch point on that picture where the lorry is there. It's a particularly poor junction. Thank you, members, for listening, and thank you, officers, for the hard work you've done on this case. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Williams.
Yeah, I think it's probably helpful if I go on record a bit as to explain what has happened here for a moment. So you will recall a healthy debate, I think 2 cycles ago now, and the reports are before you on this topic. Shortly after that debate, we received an additional representation that kind of pointed out, in my words, that report and that debate did not actively consider the paragraph 97 points that Ms. Smith has gone into at some length today. It did cover the generality, but it didn't focus specifically on that. With the benefit of hindsight, it would have been better if it had done, and I apologise for the fact it didn't. Having said that, we then did look at the issue in some detail, and took the view that as officers, we were still very relaxed about the proposal, still felt it should go forward. And to be honest, I would have been content in enacting the delegation that you gave me at that committee to sign the 106, which is now sort of, as has been explained, going through the process, and determine the application. But equally, we thought it was appropriate to touch base with the applicant and take their view as to whether they might perceive it as being better, safer, whatever the right call is, to come back to committee. And those discussions have led us to that position. So we are now explicitly addressing paragraph 97. Personally, I think Ms. Smith has demonstrated some of those distances quite well with the maps that have been shown today, and I don't want to comment further on that particularly. Equally, she's also referred to a separate representation referred in the last 48 hours, and a number of other issues being raised within those. I've discussed them at some length with both Mr. Lyon and Ms. Smith, and we are completely comfortable that the recommendation stands, and we have appropriately addressed and considered all those issues as well. So yeah, clearly debate it as you see fit, but we feel you now have everything before you and can make a sound and safe decision.
Thank you. Members, we have been through this in some detail previous meeting. If you have new points to raise, please do so. Councillor Holliday, then Councillor Brown.
Thank you. Can I just pick up on the fact that it says in the report, for which many thanks, by the way, Officer Smith, there's been no public health objection. I couldn't see any public health consultees on this particular application.
Thank you, Councillor Day. In respect to paragraph 97, we didn't reconsult on that particular section, but as the application as a whole, we were consulting with Environmental Health quite closely on all the required studies relating to noise, odour, In case there's a misunderstanding, the application as a whole had raised no environmental health objections regarding the site, its context, opening hours, litter management.
Sorry, I meant public health, because the report says no public health objection, because I'm going down it does say that the proposal won't have any adverse impact on local health, and I'm not sure I entirely agree with that, but I would have been interested to see whether there was a public health rather than an environmental health.
Can I just check the report, because it could well have been, I mean, environmental health.
Okay, that's
on that
absolutely
one.
fine. I just wanted to clarify, thank you. Page 33, top of.
So in addition to that, and Mr. Lyon is going to correct me, I'm confident if I get this wrong, there is no statutory requirement to consult public health, be that Public Health England or indeed the public health team at the county council in that regard. But equally, all these documents are a matter of public record and everybody can comment as they see fit. And I suppose I could cheekily observe further that the government's current intent is actually to reduce consultation rather than to increase it in terms of the statutory consultee list. And to be honest, I wouldn't normally expect to see comments from public health of something of this relatively small scale in the greater scheme of things.
I think Councillor Hodde, the reference probably is more relevant to environmental health as opposed to public health. Thank you, though.
Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just going to confine my comments to two things. Thank you, Officer Jamie Smith, for your presentation today. I think you've adequately dealt with the issue of Para 97. I think you've demonstrated that that should not interfere with an approval by this committee today. And on that score, I recommend approval, Mr. Chairman, if I can put that forward to you. I do have some sympathy with the local member, Councillor Punchard's comments about the pedestrian crossing. Do we know for sure whether the Highways Authority considered that but ruled it out for reasons of traffic flow and traffic safety on the main road as you exit the site? Does anyone actually know that?
Half answering the question, I recollect that Mr. Mortimer represented the County Council as a representative for the Highway Authority last time this was discussed and made it clear that they were quite content with this proposal. And whether we picked up that point, I can't remember, Councillor Brown, but it did cover a variety of highways related issues at the time, with no suggestion that the county thought anything more was required in this instance.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we have a proposer, Councillor Brown. Do I have a seconder? That's Councillor Beattie. No other speakers. We'll go to the vote, please. Recommendation is for approval.
Councillor Beattie.
For.
Councillor Brown.
For.
Councillor Fisher.
For.
Councillor Fitch-Tillett. For. Councillor Hankins.
For.
Councillor Heinrich.
For.
Councillor Holiday.
Yes.
Councillor MacDonald.
Abstain, I'm not voting.
Yeah. Councillor Netherway. Councillor Adams, please.
Yeah, abstaining on the basis of my support with the application coming forward at an earlier date. Thank you.
Councillor Boyle. For. Councillor Varley.
For.
Councillor Vickers are not voting.
Abstain.
Abstain. 9 for, 1 against, and 3 abstentions.
Okay, thank you. The application is approved. We'll take a 15-minute break now, and we'll review the situation. Are we live streaming? Okay. We come to item 11, sorry, item 10. Just jumping the gun here a little bit. Only 2 pages over. Item 10, it's down as Erpingham, but as you will all have appreciated from reading your papers, this is actually the Hanworth application that we considered last autumn. Has come back with significant updates to the design, other issues that we raised. Ms. Walker, would you care to present?
Good morning, members. I'm Alice Walker, I'm the Senior Planning Officer for this. This is the deferred application PF 24-1364 for the erection of 2-storey side and single-storey rear extensions and other alterations, including the shape of the roof and replacement windows at outlets on Hanworth Common. The application was considered by Development Committee on the 14th of November last year. After considerable debate, the committee resolved that the planning application be deferred due to matters due to design, scale and massing, with committee raising concerns that the extension should be more subservient to the host dwelling and the design and materials should be more in keeping with the local vernacular. The submitted design has been significantly altered in response to these comments. So the application is centrally positioned on the common in the village of Hanworth, which is sort of south of Rowton, for those that aren't aware. Parrow Lane, which you can see at the top there, leads to the A140. Hanworth is unique that it is one of the few grazed commons left in the UK as well. Slide 3, please. The application is centrally positioned on the common, and the dwelling occupies a prominent position within the conservation area. The topography of the landscape is such that all elevations of the dwelling feature in a series of long-range views from points along both roads, Parrow Lane to the north and the common to the south. The core of the cottage is likely to date from at least the mid-19th century. The building is neither nationally or locally listed building, and over the years there have been several alterations, including UPVC glazing, a replacement roof, likely dating from the 70s, and a single-storey extension from the 1990s. And the next slide just shows you where it's located with the common land surrounding the plot. Next slide. These images show the site as existing, and then the next slide shows some key views as you enter the village. The modern additions to the south and west sides and existing UPVC windows are of poor quality and detract from the overall character of both the host dwelling and the wider conservation area. Officers consider that the removal of one of these additions and alterations to the other would therefore offer the opportunity for enhancement. The proposal, this is just some of the existing elevations that you can see, the existing cottage, and then the next one, the existing floor plans. So in terms of the proposed plans, the proposal now seeks a more modest 2-storey side extension, which is somewhat more traditional in appearance than the original November scheme, but retains elements of the contemporary character of that scheme, notably an off-centre window and a partially jettied first floor, which you can see on the site plan there, which has been created to allow additional vehicular access to the side of the dwelling for parking. Officers consider that the scale of this section remains subordinate to the host dwelling and is appropriately set down from the host dwelling ridgeline and leaves more of the original dwelling visible, particularly on the east elevation as you approach the common on Parrow Lane. So then the first floor plans and the roof plan. The next one, please. The proposal also seeks to remove the partially hipped gables and create a fully gabled roof. The cottage has been much altered over the years and the existing roof structure is not original. Surveys have estimated that this was replaced sometime perhaps in the 1970s. As such, there are no heritage objections to this change. A full gable end would also visually enhance the subservience of the side extension on the east elevation and simplifies what could otherwise be quite an awkward juncture between the two elements. Next slide. It is acknowledged that this roof arrangement is unique to Owlets. The farmhouse opposite the cottage and the property on the common up to the east are predominantly gabled. And there are also several fully hipped properties further along Parry Lane. Given the roof is not original and this alteration would not be considering out of keeping with the surrounding conservation area, officers would not raise a heritage objection to this alteration. The rear extension has been reduced now by 750 millimetres from the original design considered by members at the November committee and is now a single storey. The roof arrangement features a low-pitch zinc roof which sits against a parapet brick wall and is intended to give the feeling of a garden wall, and it tapers down in height, which you can see on this next slide there on the east elevation. The parapet feature affords the wall a good capping detail of creasing tiles under a brick coping. This will soften the appearance and drop the height at the southern end. Therefore, long-range views from the east will be softened by screening from existing vegetation. Together with the addition of the parapet wall, the impact is substantially reduced from the rear extension and the wide conservation area. Officers consider the scheme proposes a design that lends the host dwelling a distinct character and makes use of high-quality traditional materials such as red clay pan tiles, soft red brick, natural hardwood timber cladding, and joinery, which would silver down, and the contemporary use of zinc at the rear. So the key issues. Addressing the key issues for consideration, the main issue is the impact of the design on the character and heritage of the area. The plot is considered a suitable size to accommodate the extension, and the scale of the extension is considered appropriate, being visually subordinate to the host dwelling and would not disproportionately large increase or height of the scale of the original dwelling and its appearance in the surrounding countryside in accordance with policies EM4 and HO8. In terms of design, the overall design is considered appropriate. The width of the single-storey rear extension combined with the low pitch does create a somewhat stretched quality to the rear element of the design. However, views from the south and west are likely to be limited to long range or being softened by existing vegetation. So with that in mind, these reservations are outweighed by the limited impact and more substantive benefits of the wider scheme offers to the conservation area by removing the poor existing extensions and UPVC joinery. Therefore, the scheme is considered to accord with the aims of policies EM4 and EN8 in this regard. Approval of the scheme is recommended, subject to conditions requiring submission of full materials and joinery details, ecological enhancement and external lighting restrictions.
Thank you. We have a number of speakers on this one. If I can start with Jill Wilson from Parish Council, please.
Safe. This is about Hanworth Common, 33 acres, a designated heritage asset. Owlets is a small cottage with a big impact on that common. All parties agree that it's set in the most prominent position in a conservation area. Its impact far outweighs the importance of the building, and its quirky roofline, although I've been now told it's not original, I don't know, has been part of our landscape for many years. Your own guidance says the common within Hanworth Conservation Area, which for the purposes of the NPPF is considered a designated heritage asset, and as such is afforded protection under the Planning, Listed Buildings and Conservation Areas Act 1990. Any new development in the conservation area should seek to preserve or enhance the prevailing character and appearance. When the plans for extending the cottage came before you a few months ago, you decided to defer the decision to allow the applicant to return with more acceptable plans. You said it was too big and materials are not appropriate. Well, they have returned with plans which had a larger footprint, plans which have made on-site parking more difficult, and plans which still change the profile of the roof. The result will be the cottage would look like any new domestic build from Holt to North Walsham. All character is lost in an attempt to enlarge a two-bedroom cottage. Hanworth doesn't need more large properties. We have listed all the references to which the planning policy we believe these plans breach: EN2, EN4, EN8, EN13. 20 years ago this month, in fact, the fences were put up around the common, and we fought for that common without support from any authority and won in the courts. But we still have to fight to preserve our unique landscape. As the NNDC, you are also legally required to ensure that landscape is preserved. We are not against improvement of property. In the last 4 years, there have been 12 significant planning applications in the village, 7 of which were on the common. This is the only one to which we have raised objections. Even as I speak, 3 houses are being extensively updated. But this is in the wrong place, too big, and will cause parking problems. To the people of Hanworth, this matters. It is Hanworth residents who will live with your decision every day. It is they who will pass it every day by foot or vehicle. It is they who have to deal with the parking problems. It is they who will see it every time they leave or re-enter the village. The people who fought for this common, who care for this common and own this common, ask you to respect their views. Please don't let it be enlarged out of existence. Don't let it take it over and impose its own modern ego on our special patch of North Norfolk. Thank you.
Thank you. We have one objecting speaker, Louise Rice.
I've lived in Hanworth for 3 years, and I'm also here representing Hanworth Memorial Hall Committee, our recently renovated village hall, of which more shortly, and the Commons Committee, which looks after our 33 or so acres on behalf of the village. I want to contrast the Memorial Hall renovations completed in 2022 with this application. It's worth noting that although the Memorial Hall sits on the common, it's tucked away in a hidden corner. Indeed, people have trouble finding it. Planning then were very clear that the existing footprint of the hall was not to be extended and existing features were to be restored, not replaced where possible. The Hall Committee worked closely with the Conservation Officer, and the builders did a great job making sure the building both preserves its heritage as the original village school while making it fit for 21st century concerns. Contrast that with the response of the current applicants and their 75 centimetre reduction. At the November planning meeting, applicants were asked to review their plans in order to reduce the scale of the building and consider the materials and design in order for the extending building to enhance rather than adversely impact its sensitive, high-profile site. It was also suggested that they work with the parish council to come up with an acceptable revised set of plans. And yet, far from reducing the scale of the plan, the applicants have submitted a plan with a larger footprint with, as far as we can see, allowance for only 1 car space instead of 3, despite parking not being allowed on the common, and a gable roof, which now we discover the hipped isn't original, but still the most distinctive feature of the cottage. The new plans were poorly specified, apparently because they didn't want to confuse us old folk, but they are still at a scale which we feel is inappropriate to the site. The extension of the property so close to the eastern boundary and the larger footprint of the new extension to the southern boundary seem to us to ignore the issues raised at the planning committee. Councillor John Toy did offer to mediate with the applicants and Parish Council, but he had to organise a site visit to get the applicants to engage. Sadly, it seems to minimal effect. The applicants might like to know that larger properties are much harder to rent, this from a leading rental agent who lives in the village. Perhaps they will use it as their home in retirement eventually, but from comments made, it's clear that's a doubtful long-term plan. Committee, we may be senior, but we're not stupid. We're at best disappointed at the lack of respect shown to the parish council and the village, and indeed the request from the planning committee. We'd urge you to consider the decision once again. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. We have one supporting speaker, Tim Purter Robinson.
Thank you. The applicant and I attended the November committee meeting to hear first-hand discussion on the application. We're grateful the committee has allowed us time to return with amended proposals. It is right and proper that we deal with the committee, what the committee wanted, renegotiating, as recorded in the minutes. Engagement with officers, the local member and parish council has taken a while. The new design removes the two-storey extension, which was at right angles to the host building, reducing the scale and mass. Turning now to the issues the committee wanted to be renegotiated. Firstly, the extension should be more subservient. The two-storey extension is now fully aligned, gable on gable, complementing the form and traditional character of the existing dwelling. This minimises any impact of the proposals on the countryside and conservation area. The design follows acceptable configurations from the North Norfolk Design Guide. The ridgeline of the extension is 750 mm below the host. Previously, it was 300 mm. Second point, materials more in keeping with local vernacular. Unfinished weathered boarding is now limited to the front elevation. This is not a long distant view. The boarding will match adjoining farm buildings. The east elevations are now entirely finished in soft red brick with traditional detailing to match the host building. The pitch roof extension is finished in clay pan tiles. All windows and doors are painted timber. All of the materials adhere to the North Norfolk Design Guide, material choice and selection guide in keeping with the local vernacular. Third point, more done to blend extension with a host building in a sympathetic manner, as the proposed scheme looked like an entirely separate house. The proposal no longer appears to look like two houses because it is now a linear extension of the existing. A new front entrance has been omitted. The single cottage entrance is retained. Attaching a linear extension to the host building requires a full gable to achieve a sympathetic join. Otherwise, an awkward and ugly junction would result, as observed by the officers. Fourth point, cladding at issue. This has been dealt with in my earlier comments. Fifth point, considered the proposal's modern design was not in keeping. The DM commented in the November meeting that it was not unusual for extensions to traditional buildings to be modern. Modern elements in the current proposals are limited to boarding and fenestration on the front elevation, breaking up the scale and providing a visual distinction between old and new.
She'll have to stop you there, I'm afraid. 3 minutes is up. Okay, the ward member is Councillor John Toy, who is on leave at the moment. He has sent a statement in which will be read.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So Councillor Toy says he's offering his apologies. He's not able to attend today's meeting due to pre-existing commitments. And he's restated the point you made, Chair, about this is in Hanworth, not in Erpingham. Councillor Toy says, Councillor John Toy says, Hanworth Common is the largest enclosed common in England. It is still owned and managed by the rights holders. Entering onto the common, you would notice the wide open space, trees, ponds and cattle, and a tiny cottage called Owlets. At the previous meeting, it was agreed that the applicant could attempt to engage with the locals to find a compromise on this development. The applicant has engaged with the planning officer, but not locals, who have had to refer to new plans. I asked for and received a site visit when I and a member of the parish council attended. I pointed out the issues, but there have been no further changes in the design. There was a claim that the roof had not been mentioned before. This has been a continual thread throughout comments submitted. There was a comment as early as the 11th of August 2023 that talks about the shape of the roof. Not everyone knows all of the correct technical words. It also refers to public comment on the 11th of January, and the parish council on the 15th of January mentioned the roof, and specifically mentioned with reference to the December revision. He also refers to public comment on the 20th of January, mentioning the change from half hip to gable. Whilst changes have been made and have made aspects of the proposal more acceptable, one of the key features is the shape of the roof, which makes this building not only distinctive, but matches similar buildings on the street behind. What is proposed is to take a small characterful cottage and change it into a property that could be anywhere and not the distinctive building it currently is. It will amount to urbanisation of this rural location. Residents are not against development, but this proposal does not feel that it is sufficiently acknowledging of the local vernacular and is a design that fits the mind's eye of the applicant. I hope you will take this opportunity to push back again on this development. Maybe a committee site visit would be appropriate with conservation design in attendance, as I feel that people just don't get it. So thank you for your time and consideration of this application. Councillor John Toy.
Thank you. As also Walker has pointed out, this is a unique environment, and we do have to be very, very careful with what we permit. Not going to hand over to you, Councillor Adams.
I mean, you know, just on that last point, really, by the local member, I'm sympathetic to what are fairly small conservation concerns, and you know, I don't want them to be overlooked at all. Sometimes, you know, I feel material changes to such structures sort of locally appraised can sort of look a bit like turkey teeth, really. I suppose probably a derogatory expression. But in terms of this one, I wanted to ask a few questions. Obviously, the hip roof has been mentioned as being unique in the local context here. Is this property, or indeed the roof, specifically mentioned in the conservation area appraisal? And I also noted there was an earlier comment about the glazing patterns. And I think I just wanted to ask again of the officer. I think we were sort of saying we think the fenestration might be an improvement on what was there before, because there'd been some plastic replacements, but I just noticed that glazing pattern was very different. I didn't know to what extent that was appraised by the conservation area. Sorry, the conservation officers. I have a further question on the parking, but perhaps deal with the conservation elements of my questions first.
Take that.
I would just say, you cannot legally park on a common. We just need to make that clear. And I smile because 20 years ago, I was senior solicitor at Norfolk County Council on the Commons, and Robert Harbord Hammond, I think I recall, tried to fence in the common, and we did help a little bit on that. But I do remember that. I recall that very clearly, and you did get the fencing down, so we all achieved that in the end.
With regard to the conservation area appraisal, Hanworth doesn't have an appraisal at this time.
Seems to be a serious omission if we haven't done that.
I mean, I would agree. I was, whilst, well, without getting into too much detail, I think that would have been very, very helpful to have had an appraisal in this circumstance. Okay, can I just ask in respect to the parking, it's been brought up, and it's been mentioned about on-site parking provision being different this time, perhaps not sufficient. I suppose highways will have been looking at this from, you know, policy perspective in terms of CT5 and CT6 and making sure it's compliant, but not from that sort of perspective on parking on the common. But I presume we haven't been able to determine that it's not policy compliant, but it might not be, you know, if it did result in parking happening on the common, that obviously would be an issue outside of the planning framework potentially.
So just to go back on the parking provision, at present there's a driveway for parking for one vehicle, and the other parking is sort of concrete along the front. that cars pull into off the road. This proposal would allow more parking on site so that people wouldn't be parking on that concrete stretch at the front. So if anything, it would improve the highways provision because you're creating more on-site parking. And that is in accordance with CT6.
Any further comments, Councillor Adams?
I mean, I understand, I mean, it's a comment, it's not a question. I understand the concerns about the hip roof being unique in the local context and you know, I can see why there are those concerns about it being changed. If I was representative of that ward, you know, I might take a strong view about that as well, because it's, you know, in the absence of that conservation area appraisal, it's difficult, I think, to really wave a stick at it. But it's yeah, you know, I can see why it's of concern, to be honest with you. So that's just my closing comment, really, from my perspective. And
Okay,
over to others.
thank you. Councillor Holiday.
Thank you, Chair. I'm interested in the parking actually, because there's no current plan of the building as it sits in its site to see where the parking is at the moment. I noticed that the previous plan had 2 spaces but some trees removed, and the current plan has 1 space but the trees retained. So if it's a question of parking versus trees, I think that needs to be bottomed out, given that it's on a very precious piece of land, and I'm not quite clear about that. And also it's difficult to tell because the previous site plan isn't there what the increase in footprint is of the new plan versus the current. And I'm disappointed at the loss of the hip roof because I think it's very charming and should be retained. And then my final point, which I always bring up, is there's quite a lot more glazing, and I think that especially on the south and west elevations, which looking at the map are quite obvious from long distance views, and I'd be worried about the fact that lighting is very intrusive in a natural environment, and I think you might notice that in this particular area. So if it was approved, I would want reduced BLT glass on that, but in general, I wouldn't be looking at approval. Quite frankly, I think it's got too many problems, but I really want to know about the site location and the plan, if that's possible. Thanks.
Yeah, so the scheme, it's been mentioned that the scheme is bigger than the November scheme. It's not, it's actually been reduced in size from the November committee scheme. I believe the previous proposals were 185 metres squared and the current proposal is 175 metres squared, so it has reduced. And in terms of the parking, as I said, it allows sufficient parking on site for the number of bedrooms proposed, without the loss of trees. So
it's what's the difference in size again, please?
Just 10 metres squared smaller than the November scheme.
10 square meters.
And how much bigger is that
Significant drop.
than the current building?
From the current building, I think the existing is I think it's 115. It's a 3-bed. And there's space for 3 cars on site. Yeah.
Okay, Councillor Brown.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yes, I think one of the issues at the November meeting was one of insubordination, given the scale and massing of the extension. And I take on board the comments that it's now a linear arrangement and looks less like 2 separate dwellings. I did actually support a site visit. I think this is perhaps one application where there is some justification for it, but I think we've probably moved on from when I requested that at the November meeting. I mean, the conservation and design team have obviously looked at this in the context of the revisions and are satisfied with it. It does intrigue me that out of the 80-odd conservation areas we have across the district, that, you know, Hamilton Common isn't one of them. I'm sure that's probably difficult to look back at and see why that is the case. But and I would also, if we are minded to approve this today, perhaps on the decision notice, we can put an advisory about the law relating to parking on registered common land is not permissible in law, and perhaps that can be there as an advisory for posterity. In case this property it doesn't remain in ownership for too long of the applicant, which is always a possibility. So those are my thoughts, Chairman. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with you on the parking issue, councillor. I cannot visualise that site. You're going to get a very large SUV in, sort of vehicle that is likely to appear there. It's concerning. And, how do you prevent them parking that on the common then without that the police are probably never seen in the area? Anybody else? Surprising. Okay, to move forward, we need a proposer and seconder. So I'll give you the option to refuse it or to defer again. Further things you think need revision again. Councillor Fisher.
I'll stick my head up, Mr. Chairman. I know the area fairly well and had several of my Christmas parties in the village hall or the old school. So I do know outlets quite well. I know of a number of the other houses in the village also, and I don't say that outlets as possibly any more of a blot on the landscape than any of the other places in the village. And therefore I will propose that we adopt the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. So I have a proposer.
I will second that because I think it's a vast improvement on what we saw last time.
Indeed. Okay, if nobody else wishes to speak, we'll go to the vote, please.
Councillor Beattie.
For, subject to other conditions.
Councillor Brown. Councillor Fisher.
For.
Councillor Fitch-Tillett. For. Councillor Hankins.
For.
Councillor Heinrich.
With some reluctance for.
Councillor Holiday. Councillor Netherway. Councillor Adams.
Against.
Councillor Boyle.
For.
Councillor Varley.
For.
Councillor Vickers. For. And I have 10 for and 2 against.
Okay, the application is approved, subject to the conditions. Right, if we can move on quite quickly. Now go to item 11, Hindleveston PF 23-1091. A rather interesting application, I'm sure all agree. Mr. Watson presenting. Ready?
Thank you, Chair. We're on page 83 of the agenda. There are no updates to the report, but I think just for clarity, the description is to say erection of a dwelling because there is clearly a first floor, but it's contained within the roof space. So calling it single story is probably inaccurate. The proposal is for the erection of a dwelling following the removal of the remains of the existing cottage. As the Chair has just referred to as a slightly different application to consider, because it's apparent there was a dwelling on the site which was being lived in at some time in the past, as the remains can clearly be seen. However, because of the state of the building, is in the extremely long length of time since it was last occupied, which was around 70 years ago, it is considered the dwelling has been abandoned. As such, this proposal is being considered as a new dwelling, not a replacement. As the site is within the area designated as countryside and the proposal is for a new market dwelling, it is unacceptable in principle, being contrary to policies SS1 and SS2 of the core strategy. On pages 86 and 87 of the agenda, the 4 key criteria against which the question of abandonment should be assessed are set out. Also listed in the report are 2 conflicting appeal decisions for new dwellings in Hindleveston, dated with only 15 months between them. As far as I'm aware, there have been no others since then. The current core strategy was in force at the time of those decisions. The council did not, however, have a housing land supply. It didn't have a housing land supply, did have a housing land supply in excess of 5 years at that time. So there is some slightly different circumstances. So turning to the slides, this shows the general location of the site in the village, which is very linear. It's probably roughly in the centre of the village. The site is to the north of the street and to the east of Melton Road. Next slide, please. Now moving into the site in more detail, this shows the relationship with Hope House, which is a grade 2 star listed building. Although it's within the same ownership, the cottage is not within the courtesy of the listed building and is not covered by the listing. And on there we can see the 3 closest dwellings at 69 to 71 the street, and the existing access onto Melton Road, which also serves Hope House, which would be shared. Originally, it was proposed to use the southern access onto the street, but that was changed following concerns raised by the Highway Authority about the lack of visibility in one direction. Next slide, please. This is the same with the aerial photo overlaid. Again, we can see the relationship with Hope House to the north, the closest dwelling, and the remains of the cottage shown by the red star. Next slide, please. Again, the existing site plan, this simply shows the position of the existing cottage remains in a little bit more detail. Next slide, please. Now the proposed site plan, the proposed dwelling would be sited in the same position as the cottage remains. The purple line sort of going out to the left-hand side of the drawing shows the route of the access to Melton Road, and as I've mentioned, that is shared with Hope House at the moment. Next, please. These next few slides are of the existing cottage, being an approximation of what it was like prior to collapse. So this is the ground and first floor plans. Obviously, the first floor and internal layout was not known. Next slide, please. This is the roof plan. Next, please. This is the front and rear elevation as they were assumed to be originally on the left and as they are now on the right. Next slide, please. And now the side stroke end elevations, again on the left as they were and on the right as they are now. Next slide, please. This is a photo of the original cottage as it was, and we're looking at the front elevation. The date of this photograph is unknown. Next slide, please. These are the proposed floor plans. On the top, the first floor, on the bottom, the ground. As I mentioned, the footprint is basically the same as that of the remains of the cottage. Next slide, please. Now, I think you jumped on one. Thanks. This is the proposed roof plan with dormers to the front and rear. Next, please. This is a proposed elevation. It's not a facsimile of the cottage, but has a very similar appearance, scale, and materials, and has that lower section on the right hand side as we're looking at it. Next, please. Again, the proposed rear elevation that has dormers on it, whereas the original cottage didn't. But again, the sort of general scale, height and massing are the same. Next, please. And the proposed, for completeness, the side elevations. The side one on the left-hand side, that faces northwest, and side two faces southeast. Next slide, please. Now the photos. On the left is the remains of the front elevation of the cottage. You can see the vegetation growing on straight through the floor. And on the right-hand side, you can see the side elevation with some of the outbuildings attached to Hope House in the background. Next slide, please. Now the rear elevation is on the left-hand side, and the lower section at the southeast end, and you can see Hope House in the background on that slide. On the right is the other end, and the other end elevation, and the other part of the rear elevation. This little bit with this section, there's a bit more fabric remaining in place, as you can see. Next, please. On the left is a longer distance view of the front elevation, looking from the rear access to Hope House. On the right is looking towards the site from the street, but the building would not be visible in this view. Next slide, please. Here on the left shows a relationship with the closest dwellings, 69, 71 and 73 of the street. And you can see how they've just a little bit of the front elevation of the remains of the cottage on the very left of that photo. On the right shows the cottage and how it sits in the setting of Hope House. As it stands, the remains of the building have very little impact, but the proposed dwelling would provide some degree of enhancement. Next, please. These next two photos just show the access onto Melton Road, which is currently used by Hope House. Next, please. This is a summary of the main issues to consider, but of these, the key ones really are only 1 and 6, as the proposal is considered acceptable in terms of numbers 2, 3, 4 and 5. Next, please. So, turning to recommendations, whilst there are some benefits that would arise from the proposed development, as summarised on page 96, it is considered these do not outweigh the harm in terms of achieving sustainable patterns of development. In addition, as credits have not yet been secured, the development would not be nutrient neutral, resulting in harm to the integrity of habitat sites. The recommendation is therefore for refusal for the reasons summarised on the slide. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Right, speakers, and I have no parish speaker, I have no objecting speaker, I have one supporting speaker, Jacqueline Barnes. Microphone at the front, please. Now you have 3 minutes.
Hello, I'm Jacqueline Barnes and I live in Hope House. The proposed house is for my daughter and 2 young grandchildren to live in. There is already a house there, albeit without a roof. If it had no roof, I would not be in this position. This planning application has taken approximately 2 years to get to this point. My 3 children all grew up living next door to their grandparents. We're a very close-knit family, and more so since my husband died aged 52 of cancer a few years ago. I live on my own and wish for my daughter to live next door. One of my sons lives in Hindleveston, just a few minutes away, and my other son in Holt. My granddaughter goes to Astley School in Bristol, and I take and collect her most days, and I also look after my baby grandson. The existing cottage was part of Hope House and was listed in the auction catalogue of 1957 and was sold off for death duties of the Duke of Westminster. It was at this point that it had a demolition order on it. Hope House had always been rented out up until this point, so therefore I think that's why the house has been left. There have been no objections from the Parish Council. It is a simple reinstatement of an existing structure, something that should be encouraged as it is part of our heritage, and it certainly is not an overdevelopment. There is much housing required and there is an immediate need to due to the severe housing crisis. I would hope that you would support my application. I very much enjoy my grandchildren being near me, and none of us know how much longer time we have left. I've had no objections from the neighbours, and the nutrient neutrality has been dealt with. There's no access issues, there's no heritage impact. And I don't really think it impacts anybody. The conservation design state in the response that it may well offer some opportunity for positive impact, and this should only be supported. Therefore, I would hope that it would be decided that I could have my grandchildren living next to me. And at the moment, all I can see is just the ruin of the house, which would be nice to reinstate. That's all I have to say, really. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, local member then, Councillor Hankins, 5 minutes.
I would refer members, first of all, I would commend both the officer and the applicant for their patience in handling this. This has been very long drawn out, principally the result of nutrient neutrality, which I understand now has been resolved. So we're dealing with an issue which is wholly supported by the various authorities within the application. The only objection is that this is not considered, this is considered to be a new market development, which, as you can see on page 84, we're disputing in the fact that there is clear evidence, as the speaker has referred to, of preoccupation of this cottage, both by gardeners, police officers and so on. Admittedly, that was some time ago. Now, much has been made of the gap between when it was last occupied and what is being applied for today. That is a function of the fact that this was a house that was part of the Duke of Westminster's estate. It was let. There was no continuity of improvement, etc. The house has been extensively renovated, and here is an opportunity to turn an admittedly derelict cottage that could be refurbished quite sensibly in order to provide an additional property within the village, and moreover to provide a young family, which is ideally required by the village. I have to say that if you look at the officer's comments, I'm sure he would agree with me that other than this one factor, the definition of the new market development, there are no objections. In fact, on the basis of it, that there's wholesale support. So I'd like to make one other point very briefly. I recently attended the annual general meeting of Hildon Parish Council, and I was impressed really with the range of opportunities that were described there. This is a very vibrant, well-run village. However, what was noticeable, very noticeable, without putting too fine a point on it, is the fact that the participants are not getting any younger. The village is particularly in requirement of additional families, and this opportunity here that's being provided by the applicant to provide for a young family in the middle of the curtilage of this particular property, I found to see, quite frankly, has a lot of pluses. I failed to see how this could possibly provide any harm to the village or its location. On the contrary, I think the I think the adverse is true. So I would respectfully ask the officer to reconsider based on the evidence of residential occupation, that this be considered a new market development. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, councillor Hankins. Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? For me, it comes down to the fact is there an existing property? This is a replacement dwelling, or is it totally abandoned? And therefore, this is a new market dwelling. That's what I expect. That's woken you up, rather. Start with councillor Vickers.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I just wanted a clarification. I'm not clear whether this application is for a family annex. So in the future, if Hope House was sold, they would be sold with the cottage, or whether the cottage is going to be an independent dwelling, so it could be sold in its own right. Could you clarify that for me to start before I comment?
The application is for an independent dwelling,
It's for an independent.
not an annex, yeah.
I just want to correct one of the assertions on page 89 that the village doesn't have a shop. It has a very fine farm shop at Martin's Farm, just about 100 yards away from Hope House, that sells locally sourced meat, vegetables, fruit, cakes, milk, bread, in fact, anything that anyone would need for their daily needs. I'm very much in sympathy with what Councillor Hankins has said. I think, historically, when the Duke of Westminster's estate was sold, there were so many rundown houses in the village that were deemed not fit for human habitation, and some of them were refurbished and some were not. And this is a substantial ruin, and I think that it should be rebuilt. And in my view, the officer has taken a very narrow view of this application.
That's right.
Yeah, I mean, these cases are always difficult, aren't they? Because we have sympathy with the position of the applicants, but we have to apply the development plan policies that are in force at the time. Obviously, your development plan policy is pretty clear when it comes to sort of the considerations of new build dwellings in the countryside. Now, clearly, I don't think anyone is disputing that there was a dwelling on the site in the past. We can clearly see it in the photographs that there was a dwelling on the site in the past. But here we are, what, 70 odd years later from when it was last used. That building is clearly not in sort of habitable use, and we've taken the view that the use has been abandoned. Now, clearly, that does influence the application of policy, because if there's no longer a dwelling there, then you're applying a different policy test to if there was something there to convert. I mean, there's policies in our plan that talk about conversion of buildings into dwellings, but that does require those buildings to be in sort of sound condition and not requiring substantial rebuilding. Now, clearly, this building isn't in pretty good condition. We can see that from the photographs. There's trees growing out of the walls. You'll have to completely knock down that building and start again if you wanted to build something on the site. So it does present quite a difficulty in policy application, because whatever we do here will be thrown back at us in the future if we make a decision that's kind of contrary to the development plan without material considerations or justifications to why we're doing it. We will end it ourselves in difficulty. Now, the case officer referred to 2 appeals, so inspectors have looked at development in the village, and they've come to differing views. And obviously, you as a committee could come to a differing view to ourselves as officers, but it's hard to see when you apply the policy how you would come to a favourable view at this time as an independent dwelling on the site. Now, the applicant hasn't proposed it, but had we been considering an annex, obviously we would be looking at different sort of policy considerations, but that's not what's before us today. What's before us is a separate dwelling. But I'll just put that out there. That's different policy would be applying for an annex. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. A lot of what I was going to ask has already been answered. I'm struggling a little bit because I get exactly what the officer said, but You got a family with some land with a building which is a complete wreck sitting on it that want to build a house for their family. And the alternative is to leave it as it is. So I'm inclined to approve it, but I'm struggling with the whole concept of that, actually.
Okay, Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's important here when we look at this to appreciate the distinction between a property that is so derelict that it meets the tests of abandonment legally, and as the officer, Mr. Lyons, has just said, to build a property on this in this location would not be a refurbishment or a reinstatement. It probably hasn't got the structural integrity. And we have had applications like this previously, where we've taken the view that it's not appropriate if the location of the property is in designated SS1 and SS2 open countryside in planning terms and is therefore unsustainable. And I noticed there isn't any reference to this property if we did permit it improving the 5-year land supply. We have had that in previous reports, in previous committees, but it's not here today. So I just want to make the point that because it's in an unsustainable location, the committee are aware that we can rebut the presumption of paragraph 11D. We're not obliged to say we have to accept it because we haven't got a 5-year land supply. If it's in an unsustainable location, that's been our sort of safety net against developers coming to us and saying, well, you've got no 5-year land supply, so you must permit this, even though it's contrary to policy. And where there is an immediate benefit to the family, and we're looking at not approving it to facilitate that, it is, as you made the point, very, very difficult. These are very sensitive applications, and you do want to approve wherever possible, but we are a plan-led authority. I hope we'll remain so as we move to the emerging new local plan. And therefore, with a really heavy heart, I have to say, it doesn't meet policy, unfortunately. And I accept that the nutrient neutrality issue can be settled. You know, credits are available to purchase to resolve that issue 2 years on, fortunately. But I, with a heavy heart, would propose that we accept the officer's recommendation, Chair, so I'm quite happy to propose that. But it doesn't give me any pleasure to do it.
Thank you, Councillor. That's right.
So I think the circumstances here are unusual, but probably not unique. And I think it was actually a good call in to put those to the test. I'm sure the architect probably had a bit of fun actually drawing the existing circumstances of the building, and you hardly argue it's not a design improvement there. And we've heard, of course, that the nutrient mitigation issues can be dealt with certainly by condition, and I think I've read within the report that boundary treatments to delineate the two properties can be as well. I disagree actually with the last speaker. I think this should be approved. I think you can look at this as brownfield land as well as previously developed land, and opportunities such as this really do not come very frequently. And as I said at the beginning, it's a fairly unusual set of circumstances, and I think that calls for this sort of consideration. And I don't think that a sort of policy purism approach is always a good thing. I think you've sometimes got to look at the circumstances around, and as we should be looking at applications, we should be considering applications on their merits. And I think to reuse this derelict structure, reuse this brownfield land, and to provide a property that clearly will have some value. I think taking all those things into account, for me, the benefits outweigh those policy considerations. Of course, we've got to have those policy considerations. They're there for a reason. But we have this committee to consider circumstances such as this. And I thought it was quite fun actually reading through this application, just because it's not often you get to look at a building that's been empty for over 50 years potentially. But I thought it was a good proposal. So I hope we can move to the vote on the officer's recommendation. I certainly respect the officer recommendation in terms of the policy constraints, but I won't be voting with it, and I'll be proposing that the application is accepted.
Well,
Yeah, I mean, if the committee were minded to support Councillor Adams' sort of line of thinking on this, I think it would be important to articulate what are the material considerations that justify departing from the development plan, because that's the important bit, because we need to differentiate this proposal from any others that might come in, because there are plenty of buildings that are in a dilapidated condition in our district that could come forward for proposals for dwelling. So it's important that if you were to depart from the officer advice, that you clearly articulate what those material considerations are that justify a departure. Otherwise, say it makes it difficult for us on future applications.
I still wonder whether it's technically a replacement dwelling. I'm struggling with that. I do have sympathy with Councillor Adams. Councillor Fitch-Tillett.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Great shame that this cottage has been allowed to fall into disrepair. However, I hear all that everybody has said and the officer's recommendation, and I'm prepared to second the officer's recommendation for refusal.
Thank you. Councillor Vickers, you want to another go?
I was just going to make the point to Mr. Lyons that I think Councillor Adams has already made a very clear case about building on a brownfield site, and I would add to it that we've got a highly respected conservation team who've not only not objected to this, but given it their active support.
Thank you. Anybody else wish to speak? I would remind you that the recommendation is for refusal. If we reject that, then we can come back with an alternative recommendation with planning reasons from the floor. So we can go to the vote, please.
Councillor Beattie.
Abstain.
Councillor Brown. Councillor Fisher. Councillor Fitch-Tillett.
For.
I have Councillor Hankins as abstaining. Is that correct?
I can't vote.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. Councillor Heinrich.
Against.
Councillor Holiday. Councillor Netherway. Councillor Adams.
Against, some shouting, I think it's 3 microphones on.
Councillor Boyle. Councillor Varley.
Against.
Councillor Vickers.
Yes.
I have 3 for, 7 against and 1 abstention.
Okay, the recommendation is lost. If we would now require an alternative recommendation, I presume is for approval. Councillor Adams.
Understandably, there's going to need to be some conditions here around reaching nutrient neutrality, the boundary treatments, and likely others that have been highlighted. I think that's understandable. But I think, you know, the things we teased out in the debate in terms of the brownfield land, the appraisal in terms of conservation design impacts, and you know, this being a relatively unique, well, not unique, but rarer set of circumstances, then I propose that we offer conditional approval.
Thank you. Do you have a seconder? Take Councillor Varley. You can't take part, Councillor Atkins. Yeah, can I let, okay, you go ahead and I'll bring Mr. Williams in.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I endorse what Councillor Adams has just stated. I think there does need to be a string of conditions added to this. I'd really like to see landscaping and environmental plans, but also energy efficiency aspects as well. It does mention within the report that the applicant has been asked to consider the use of an air source heat pump. Are we able to condition that? Would that be possible? Yeah, fantastic. Then I ask that does be conditioned. Thank you.
Okay, Officer Williams.
Right, okay. Can I just try and put to you back what you've said effectively, but in a manner that is something that is sensible from a professional perspective. So that would be to authorise me to issue a conditional approval on terms bluntly I see fit, but picking up on the sorts of things you have said already, subject to the prior resolution of the nutrient neutrality matter, which whilst it can be sorted, hasn't been yet, so needs to be sorted. But for the avoidance of, sorry, and if it doesn't need to be sorted, then it doesn't. If it does need to be sorted and it can't, then we got a problem. We'd have to come back here. Okay, just picking up on the vibe to my left there. But for the avoidance of doubt, the approval is for a separate dwelling, not an annex or anything along those lines. That's the line of your debate. Okay.
Yeah.
And Mr. Lyon is just going to correct me slightly, I suspect.
It's not a correction, but it's just a clarity on nutrient neutrality, because actually if as a committee you're saying in effect that there's a building there to convert, or the residential use of that site hasn't been lost, then there's an existing dwelling, and from a nutrient neutrality perspective you don't then need to provide nutrient mitigation because there's already a dwelling in theory that's there. But that obviously is a judgment call for you as a committee, whether you think the use hasn't been abandoned, which is a technical issue. I don't really want to get the committee into a technical issue on abandonment because that's too complicated. But
so can I just chip in on top of Mr. Lyon, sorry, and say, in my view, I can see where Mr. Lyon is coming from, but I do think this should be addressing the nutrient neutrality. Well, I do think it is a new dwelling. Clearly, what is there at the moment is nowhere near livable in, changeable to livable in within its own auspices, which a number of you have already said. But broadly, if I just take wide ranging, when I'm happy with nutrient neutrality, we can move to issue the decision. That would be good enough. I suspect you can trust me to resolve it.
Well, I was just going to say I agree with that, because it's almost it's such an added layer of complexity that only I think a court could probably come to a determination on, isn't it? And I think almost for the sake of simplicity, but yeah, no, it's an interesting one certainly. But I think I agree with what's just been said there. Probably is the best way of dealing with that. Yeah.
So just to clarify where I think we are at the moment, we're now seeking delegated approval, subject to officers agreeing a whole set of conditions which we have outlined. Are we happy with that? Saw a couple of hands up.
Is there a condition there about removal of PD rights? Because the conservation and design were worried about the impact of over domestication.
Yeah, I certainly think there is a logic, to misquote Councillor Adams and probably leap to the side of where he was saying, that providing this looks like roughly what was there before, it's okay-ish. Anything that had been substantially different probably wouldn't be. So therefore that PD right is entirely appropriate to be one of the conditions, I would say.
Well, coming, Councillor Littlewhite.
I'm not quite sure whether Councillor Varley seconded it. If he did, great, and if he didn't, I will.
I do have Councillor Varley down as a second. Okay. So I think we've reached a point where we can go to another vote. All happy?
Councillor Beatty,
No for.
Councillor Brown,
Against.
Councillor Fisher,
For.
Councillor Fitch-Tillett,
Abstain.
Councillor Henrik,
For.
Councillor Holiday, Councillor Netherway, Councillor Adams,
For.
Councillor Boyle,
For.
Councillor Varley, Councillor Vickers,
4.
6, 7, 8. 8, 2 and 1.
Okay, thank you. The application now receives delegated approval, subject to conditions to be agreed with the planning officers. Thank you. And finally, you're happy, colleagues, we'll carry on. Hopefully we can finish by 1:30. We have Northrop's BF 250384. Not dissimilar to ones we've had before in terms of glamping pods in the Northrop's area. Okay, Officer Luckhurst, when you're ready.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, councillors. This is a full plan and application which seeks retrospective planning permission for the change of use of land to allow the siting of 2 glamping pods. The site's located within designated countryside and also within the AONB and an area defined as undeveloped coast. You can see on this slide here the red line enclosing the site to the rear of the existing agricultural buildings. This is the proposed site plan showing the positioning of the 2 glamping pods and the pedestrian access to that. Elevations of what has been labelled as the Kestrel pod, so that will provide a 2-bed unit. And plans and floor plans for the Skylark pod, providing a 1-bed unit. I've added a sliding here which shows the location of Shrublands Farm, which is positioned about 700 metres to the west of the site. And this was an application that we received in 2022 for a similar proposal, retention of 2 glamping pods, and it was refused. It then went to appeal and was also later dismissed at appeal as well. And this is just a slide to show you again the distance between the 2 sites and to show how close they are. And then looking to the east on the site at the pods, the access road off Hungary Hill, looking east again, and then looking west on Hungary Hill. This is looking into the site, so taken from the road. Looking south, you can see some of the existing agricultural buildings to the side, and behind the wooden fence are where the glamping pods are. Views to the west of just the surrounding land of the site. So the main issues that we're looking at is the character and appearance and impact on the street scene, highway safety and impact on amenity. The application is recommended for refusal as it's considered to be contrary to policy EC7, which confirms that proposals for new buildings for unserviced holiday accommodation in the countryside will not be allowed, and they will be treated as permanent residential dwellings. In addition, EC10 also does not allow for new camping sites within the AONB or the undeveloped coast, both of which the sites are located within, and therefore the proposal is recommended for refusal for the reasons shown on the screen at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you. Nice and clear and concise. Right, I have a couple of speakers here. First is Lorna Fish from the Parish Council. If you'd like to come just to the nearest microphone, if Councillor Ball will lend you a hand. Please.
My name is Lorna Fish. I am Vice Chairman of Northcote Parish Council, and I speak on behalf of the Parish Council. The application for these two the Parish Council has absolutely we need to point out that we have received no response from anyone in the locality who resides in the village who would not like to see these glamping pods. Everybody appears to be not concerned about them. Where they're situ in a very, very good farming complex. And I would mention here that the farmers there do accommodate us very, very well indeed. When we have snow drifts, they clear the roads for us. And if there's a tree down, they'll clear that as well. And I can assure all members of the council that it is a very well respected and very, very well looked after site. We can see that, yes, okay, it's in an area of natural beauty, and for which we're incredibly lucky to live in that area ourselves. But having known this area, and many, many residents have known it since they were knee-high, they cannot see a problem. Highways Department have no problem with it because the amount of traffic that goes up and down that road and would go up and down that road with the two glamping pods is nothing compared with what used to go up and down that road when the old glass houses were there and it was a nursery. The road, yes, is narrow like many country roads, and many people who work from the village, they exit that road up there to go to work, Munsley, Bacton Gas Site, all down that area. So cannot see a problem. And our parish council would recommend that this application goes ahead. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I now move to no objecting speaker, one supporting speaker, John Norfolk. You come to the microphone at the front, please. Thank you. Yeah, you've got 3 minutes.
Good afternoon, Chair. Thank you for the opportunity to speak on behalf of the applicant. The scheme is for retrospective change of use of land to allow for the siting of 2 glamping pods. It represents a sustainable development that will deliver economic, social and environmental gains. The proposal comprises of 2 new tourist accommodation units within a group of farm buildings where there was previously large commercial polytunnels, and it is supported by the Council's Farm Diversification Policy, EC1. Since Brexit operated subsidy-free, their incomes have dropped by 50%. Sustainable parking and farming incentives run by DEFRA, which offered extra income, were curtailed following the 2024 budget. leaving farmers without the opportunity to access another income stream. Also on the horizon is the introduction of inheritance tax on agricultural land, which will lead farmers to needing more income to pay the resulting bills. There is a greater need now than ever before for farmers to diversify their income to make a living. The proposed glamping pods seek to enhance the tourism offer in the locality, thereby creating additional opportunities for local businesses such as the Foundry Arms Public House in North Reps and local shops in Overstrand, all which rely heavily on tourism. The proposal would bring benefits to local shops and services, promoting and encouraging economic growth. The proposal brings social benefits too. The application site is only 500 metres from the settlement of North Reps, which has a public house and bus stops, and only 900 metres from local shops and beaches in Overstrand, all accessible by a public right-of-way, so visitors would have options to travel by non-car modes. Many tourists desire this type of location on a small site, within walking distance of daily destinations. The proposal promotes walking, cycling, and the use of public transport. The site will also bring environmental benefits, as the proposed tourist development is only 90 metres from the existing farmhouse and sits within the farmyard complex amongst existing agricultural buildings. The site has been developed historically for horticultural use, and the proposed development would offer visual improvements to the previously erected polytunnels. The proposal is not extending built form into the open countryside and does not result in a harmful impact on the rural character and appearance of the wider rural area, including the area of outstanding natural beauty. The scheme is considered to conserve the character of the surrounding landscape, potentially resulting in an overall environmental improvement. To conclude, the scheme would deliver these benefits.
Right, 3 minutes is up. Hear what you're saying.
Okay, councillor Fitch-Tillett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I've amended my salutation to good afternoon. I've called this in for the reasons specified in the report. The most important being policy EC1, farm diversification. We are only too aware that farms are under great threat, not only from central government, but also from the loss of food production to energy generation. This is not a huge factory-type farming operation, but a small family farm trying to support its food production by a tourism offer. Let's go through the main issues for consideration. The recent appeal decision on the previous application is not relevant. It refers to a site approximately a half-kilometre away and is not even visible to or from this site and is located in a different highway. 2. The site was originally developed with light reflecting polytunnels. Please can we see the photos supplied on the screen? And can it stay there, please? 3. There is no impact on the character of the area. Even the report states that the pods are screened by farm buildings, a natural hedge, and further boarded fencing. Compare this again to the glass houses and polytunnels, which sat unscreened on the top of the Cromer Ridge. 4. There is no impact on amenity. The report again. 5. Highways, no objections. And as we've heard, plenty of footpath links to the coast and amenities. 6. Biodiversity. This can be conditioned. So, the Norfolk Coast Partnership states that the visual impact is relatively contained. It is not therefore assessed as significant harm to the designated landscape. It is not a new site in the undeveloped coast. It is a farmyard, for goodness sake. Obviously, as previously stated, I shall not be voting as I am predetermined. But I plead with members to use their common sense and approve this application. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor. Right, stop. Councillor Adams then.
Well, my apologies to the local member and the members of the public present and the applicant. Regrettably, I'm going to have to go shortly because we'll get to Walcott. But I wanted to speak briefly just to say that I found their arguments persuasive on this one. I appreciate the policy constraints here, but I look at the impacts and it appears to be so very small, and the impact on the landscape certainly contained. I don't even know how you'd see it, to be honest. Is there a public footpath where you can see it? I really couldn't really see an impact in terms of the landscape value. So it just leads me to think that, you know, that there's some, albeit modest because of the size, benefits to the local economy, but certainly the impacts seem to be next to none. And I think enabling that diversification of the agricultural business, the farm, to enable that to be sustained in other ways, given those small or in fact non-existent impacts, I think is overall a good thing. So that's just what I wanted to say. I'm going to have to dart off. So thank you.
Thank you. I'll take councillor Netherwayne and councillor Vickers.
Thanks, Chair. I'd like to echo the comments made by councillors Adams and Fitztillett. It's not in my ward. I pass by it every single day, virtually. I can't see it's going to pose any issues at all. Probably please the landlord of the pub because he doesn't get that much, and I'm sure a couple more visitors will be welcome. There is a shop, not very busy. It will help there as well. I know the area okay. I don't think it's going to be seen. I can't see it being any kind of visual issue at all. And the comments regarding the farming community at the moment, if it helps those guys continue to do what they do, which includes clearing the roads when the rest of us can't, I'm all for it. Thanks.
Councillor Vickers.
I can only echo what the other councillors have said. The pods, to my mind, are not conspicuous. There's a small economic benefit, and I think we should be helping cash-strapped farmers to diversify. And I also note the chairman of the parish council's strong local support for the application. So I would be minded to approve it.
Thank you. Councillor Hankins.
Thank you, Chairman. Page 101, policy EC7. The last point of that paragraph says, however, the policy goes on to conform that proposals for new build on-service holiday accommodation in the countryside will be treated as though they are permanent residential dwellings, will not be permitted. Is in approving this, is there a sort of implied approval of residential dwellings?
Sorry, I thought Jeff was going then. Okay, I was just going to say, no, so when we approved it, we will probably approve it with conditions if the application was to be approved in terms of restricting the occupancy of the pods. And for example, how long they can be occupied for how long out of the year, etc. So they wouldn't be allowed to operate as individual residential dwellings. But it's just when we look at it in terms of policy, we would assess it as a permanent residential dwelling in the countryside.
If I may, many farms put caravans and the like alongside the farm to provide dwellings for farm workers. In this particular case, would that be applicable?
No, so those would be considered as agricultural workers' dwellings, and you wouldn't be allowed to use these pods as I say, as a permanent unit. So even if it was someone who worked for the farm, they wouldn't be able to reside in the pods full time.
Okay, thank you.
Let's switch to it here. Let's come back.
I can answer that for you. These are purely holiday accommodation, and the applicant advises me that they are probably used for 2 or 3 days at a time and for about 20 weeks of the year. And there is no need for agricultural workers on that site.
Yeah. Councillor Holiday, then.
I'm happy to propose it. I'm,
You're proposing acceptance of the officer recommendation, which is.
no, I'm happy to propose acceptance of the refusal.
We have to work through the system, of course. We have to vote against the officer recommendation for
Okay.
refusal before we can go the other way.
I'm sorry,
As we did with the previous.
I'm proposing that we refuse it, actually.
Yeah, right.
Actually,
That's clear.
Just to make, because I'm actually think that policies are there to be upheld, actually, and
We're all getting hungry and confused.
yeah, and I think we should refuse it. So I'm proposing that. So someone needs to, in order to move things on.
Okay. Right. Let's come to Councillor Brown first.
Yeah, just quickly, Chair. I'm just wondering whether we'll be doing some monitoring. Can we condition some monitoring that this will be used for as holiday accommodation for no other purpose, and that if for any reason they fall into disuse, that they are removed and the site is returned to its previous, undeveloped state, particularly as it's in the Norfolk Coast National Landscape, but better known as the AONB. If that can be the case, weighing up the position or the location, concealment, the welcome into the village of the business, and the all-important EC1, I might actually recommend that these are approved and go against the recommendation of the officer.
Okay, well, we're currently debating the officer recommendation, which is refusal, but I hear what you're saying. I'm getting,
Yeah, but I'm
getting the message from
with
you.
all due respect, Chair, it's
Yes, it is getting late.
it's been it was a long day yesterday for some of us, and it's getting late. So I just want to accelerate the progress.
Yes, quite.
That's all right.
Councillor Fisher, then Councillor Varley, and then we'll.
To move things along, Mr. Chairman, and as Councillor Holiday's number 2, I'd be quite happy to second the officer's recommendation, just to move things on.
Thank you. Councillor Varley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll try and be concise. I am very sympathetic with the applicants. I mean, we're talking about policy. Yes, we should we should uphold policy. But as a committee, we discuss policy, and we obviously have to decide how rigid we want to be with those policies. And sometimes common sense obviously does prevail. In regards to farms and farmers, I think it's really important that diversification is encouraged by us, the planning organisation. So I'm more than happy to go through the process, but I will be voting against the officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Right. Before we take a vote, officer want to add anything?
Well, I mean, to say this is clearly a balance between economic benefits of farm diversification and the harm to the national landscape. So that's the choice that you're making as a committee. Does the harm outweigh the economic benefits, or do you weight it differently as a committee yourself from coming up with that decision?
Let's see what is given. Okay, the officer recommendation is for refusal. Proposed by Councillor Holiday, seconded by Councillor Fisher. Clearly, if you wish to go the other way, you must vote against the officer recommendation. To make sure we're absolutely clear, we're all getting a bit tired and jaded at the moment. Okay, can we take the vote, please?
Councillor Beattie,
Against.
Councillor Brown,
Against.
Councillor Fisher, Councillor Hankins, Councillor Heinrich,
Against.
Councillor Holiday,
For.
Councillor Netherway, Councillor Adams left. Councillor Boyle,
Against.
Councillor Varley,
Against.
Councillor Vickers,
Against.
8. I have 8 against and 2 for.
So picking up on the mood of the room and to try and bring this to a head, clearly Councillor Brown has already proposed an alternative here. So I'm sure when the chair lets somebody second it, you'll have a number of volunteers. But can I work on the assumption that will be to delegate approval subject to conditions at the discretion of officers, i.e. me, but would include the holiday let point, GI Rams tariff being sorted first. And we will give some thoughts to Councillor Brown's suggestion as to if not use, then remove, I paraphrase, as to whether we can construct a condition that would be valid in that territory and would be sensible. There probably are one or two others. The other reason that I would just think, from where I heard the debate, that you generally went against the recommendation, actually took account of the points Councillor Fitch-Tillett made about the location of those pods in relation to the proximity to the farmyard and what was there before. So they, whilst they are clearly in the countryside, they're not out in the middle of nowhere countryside. So therefore the impact is a bit lesser than some other places. End of observation.
Certainly not in the middle of a green field. Councillor Varley.
Thank you. Can I just get the clarification on the BNG? Will that be able to be conditioned?
No, because it's, sorry, because it's retrospective, it's not something that's caught by the engine.
Ms. Hardy.
Can I just bring your attention to what Landscape said about should this application go forward for approval, the business should be tightly confined within the red line boundary because there's some query about whether it's expanding into adjacent fields and lighting should be conditioned. So, and perhaps does PD apply here? I don't know, but I get the feeling that domestification's a bad.
So agree on your first points, and PD won't apply in this scenario in any event.
Councillor Netherwine.
Yeah, I'd like to second the proposal too.
Okay, thank you. Unless anybody has anything new to add. Let me go.
Yes, Chair. I wouldn't wish. I wouldn't wish to condone retrospective applications. I don't want anybody to leave this or anybody viewing online to think that you know, we don't differentiate between retrospective and non-retrospective. Just to make that point, Chair, we never welcome retrospective applications.
I would agree, but notwithstanding, I think there are valid reasons to look at this one slightly differently. Let's go to the vote then, please. The recommendation now is for approval subject, delegated approval subject to conditions to be agreed.
Councillor Beattie.
For.
Councillor Brown.
For.
Councillor Fisher.
Yes, sir.
Councillor Hankins.
For.
Councillor Heinrich.
For.
Councillor Holiday. Councillor Netherway. Councillor Boyle.
For.
Councillor Varley.
For.
Councillor Vickers. 4. 8. I've got 8 for, 1 against and 1 abstention.
Okay, the recommendation is carried. Approval subject to conditions to be agreed. And it is nearly to 1:30, so we now just need to deal with the last pieces. So item 13.
Officers have no comments to make on any of the rest of the reports, but would happily answer questions if you have any.
Any questions? In which case I declare the meeting closed at 13:29.